You wake up, you shower, you dress, and you put on the mask. You smile in meetings, nod when someone talks over you, and laugh at jokes that don't land. You give answers you don't believe in because they're safer. You scroll through feeds and post what others will like, not what matters to you. You say yes when you mean no. You say it's fine when it isn't. And every time, something real inside you moves further away. You learn to wear the mask early. Maybe it started in school when being liked meant fitting in. Maybe someone told you you were too much, too loud, too quiet, too weird. So you adjusted. You made yourself smaller or more agreeable. You put away pieces that didn't seem to fit. The mask helped. It kept you safe. It helped you belong. But over time, you forgot where the mask ended and you began. Now it's automatic. You walk into a room and gauge what version of yourself people want. Around your boss, you stay agreeable. Around friends, you laugh at the right times. With family, you avoid certain topics. Each version pleases someone, but none of them feel like you. And when you're alone, it's quiet, but not peaceful. You scroll again. You check your messages. You stay busy. Anything to avoid the silence that might tell you something's off. It's not just people-pleasing, it's survival. The mask helps you avoid conflict. It helps you get through the day, but it costs you something. You don't ask for what you need. You don't speak up when something matters. You tell yourself it's no big deal, but over time, your voice gets quieter. You don't feel joy, only relief that nothing went wrong. You don't feel known, only tolerated. You start wondering if anyone really likes you, or if they just like the mask. You tell yourself it's temporary. You'll be more honest when things calm down. You'll stop pretending once you've proven yourself, once you get the job, once they accept you. But the finish line moves, and each time you push your real self down, it gets harder to bring it back up. It shows up in small ways. You hesitate before giving your opinion. You check how others react before you laugh. You notice your tone, your posture, your word choice. You filter every sentence before speaking. You become more editor than person. And when someone asks what you want, you don't know. Not because you're indecisive, but because you've spent years focused on what others want. Sometimes you catch yourself in the mirror and don't recognize the face. Not because it's unfamiliar, but because it's blank. Polished, yes, but hollow. You feel tired, not the kind sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from being on all the time. You wonder what would happen if you dropped the mask, if you said what you really think, if you asked for something you actually want. Would people walk away? Would they laugh? Would you even know how to speak without the filter? The truth is, you won't get answers until you try, and trying feels risky. Maybe you open up to someone and they look confused. Maybe they brush it off. Maybe you stumble when you speak honestly because it's been so long. That's normal. You're not broken. You're rusty. Authenticity is a muscle. You haven't used it much, so it shakes, but it's still there. Let's say you're in a meeting and someone shares an idea you don't agree with. You feel the usual urge to nod and move on. But this time, you pause. You say, "I see where you're coming from, but I think there's a risk we haven't looked at." Your heart races. They might dismiss it, but maybe they don't. Maybe someone else speaks up too, and for a moment, you feel it. Realness, not control, not performance, something closer to truth. Or maybe a friend says something that crosses a line. You usually laugh it off, but this time you say, "That didn't sit right with me." They might apologize, they might get defensive, but now they know where your line is, and you know you can speak up without the world falling apart. These moments are small, but they stack. Each time you take off the mask, even briefly, you reclaim something: your preferences, your boundaries, your values. You learn what it feels like to stand on your own ground. It's shaky at first. You'll question yourself. You'll backtrack. You'll try to put the mask back on. That's okay. It's familiar. But now you've seen what's underneath. And it's not weak. It's not shameful. It's you. This doesn't mean being loud or confrontational. It means being real. It means letting your no be no and your yes be full. It means asking yourself, do I believe this, before agreeing. It means saying, I'm not okay, without following it with, but I'm fine. It means knowing what you want, not what you're supposed to want. The mask will still be there. It's a tool, not a flaw. Sometimes you'll need it. Sometimes you'll use it on purpose. But the difference is now you'll know it's a choice, not a default. You'll take it off more often. You'll stop mistaking it for your face. You'll stop fearing that what's underneath isn't enough. Because the truth is, being accepted for who you're not is a slow kind of rejection. And being seen, even once, for who you are is worth more than years of applause for a role you didn't choose. You don't mean to do it. You care about them. You want them to feel safe with you. But even with the best intentions, you hurt them. Not because you're cruel, not because you don't love them, but because you're human. Because love doesn't cancel out blind spots. Because your habits, your fears, your past, all of it leaks out in ways you don't always see. It might start with something small. You forget a promise. You interrupt. You make a joke that lands wrong. You don't notice their mood shift. They give you a look or pull away, and you feel it, the distance. You tell yourself they're being sensitive. You didn't mean it, but it happened anyway. They're hurt, and now you're defensive, so you explain instead of listen. You say they misunderstood, that it wasn't your intent, and maybe that's true, but now they feel unseen on top of being hurt. Love doesn't stop this from happening. If anything, it makes it more likely. The people closest to you will see your roughest edges. You let your guard down around them. You speak without thinking. You take shortcuts in conversations. You assume they'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and they might, but only for so long. Even solid relationships crack under the weight of repeated harm, especially when it goes unspoken. Say you care about someone who struggles with anxiety. You want to help, so you try to fix things quickly. You offer advice when they're upset. You say you're overthinking it because you want them to feel better. But what they hear is, you're a burden. Your feelings aren't valid. You didn't mean that. You were trying to comfort, but you used your way, not theirs. That mismatch causes pain, even if your heart was in the right place. Or maybe someone you love tells you something vulnerable. They say they feel alone, and instead of sitting with them, you respond with your own story. You don't do it to compete. You do it to relate, to say, I felt that too. But now the moment has shifted. They're back in the shadows, and you're in the light. You didn't mean to take the space, but you did, and they feel it, even if they don't say it. These moments build. Over time, people stop bringing things up, not because they've healed, but because they've stopped expecting you to hear them. That's how distance forms, not from big betrayals, but from small ones repeated. The sigh when they need you, the scroll when they speak, the eye roll, the quick fix, the skipped apology. None of it screams cruelty, but all of it says, you matter less than my comfort. You hurt the ones you love because love is risky. It requires honesty. It means showing parts of yourself that still need work. You think your patience will always hold, but it won't. You think your tone is neutral, but it's sharp. You think you're listening, but you're waiting for your turn to speak. And when they push back, your reflex might be to defend, not to reflect. You want to be the good one. You don't want to admit you caused harm. So you avoid the guilt by shifting blame. But guilt is not the enemy. Shame says you're a bad person. Guilt says you did something that hurt someone. One destroys connection. The other makes repair possible. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be responsible. That means looking at the moments you'd rather forget. It means listening when someone tells you that hurt. Not to argue, not to explain, just to hear it, and to believe them, even when it stings. Let's say you miss an important event, something small, like dinner plans. You forgot, you were tired, you had a rough day. They say, that really let me down. You could list the reasons. You could say they're overreacting. Or you could say, I hear you. I let you down. I'm sorry. That small shift opens the door again. It says, I care more about you than being right. Sometimes the hurt is deeper. Maybe you grew up around shouting, so you raise your voice without meaning to. The person you love flinches, shuts down. You don't think you're being harsh, but their body reacts like danger just walked in. This isn't about intent, it's about impact. And if you care about them, you'll care about how your behavior lands. You'll take it seriously. You'll get curious about your patterns. You'll do the work to change them, not just once, but over time. Repair is possible, but not if you pretend nothing happened. Not if you rush forgiveness. Not if you expect them to bounce back just because you said sorry. Real apology includes change. It includes patience. You don't get to set the pace of their healing, and you don't get to demand closure. That's part of loving someone, letting them feel what they feel, even if it's inconvenient for you. You won't always get it right. You'll mess up again. You'll say something thoughtless. You'll miss a signal. You'll let your own stress bleed into how you speak to them. That doesn't mean you're toxic. It means you're human. But each time you own the harm and try to do better, you build trust. Not by being perfect, but by being willing to face what's hard. People stay in relationships where they feel seen, not flattered, not managed, seen. That means their pain is allowed in the room. That means you don't have to agree with their version of events to respect it. That means you don't use love as a shield to avoid accountability. But I love you doesn't cancel out harm. It just makes repair worth the effort. When someone says, that hurt, try this, pause, breathe, don't jump in, don't list your reasons, don't fold into yourself and say, I'm the worst. Just stay with it. Ask them what they need. Ask if there's something you can change. And then do the hard part, actually changing. The ones you love don't need you to be flawless. They need you to be honest. They need you to notice. They need you to care enough to adjust. You can't take back the moments where you caused pain, but you can take ownership. You can try again. You can make it clear that hurting them isn't something you take lightly, even when it was unintentional. That's what love looks like when it grows up. Not clean, not perfect, but real. You feel proud now. You made the call. You stood your ground. You walked away. You pushed through. You didn't apologize. You told them off. You proved your point. You shut the door. You clung to the plan. You stuck to the timeline. You cut them out. You said what needed to be said, or so you thought. Today, it feels like strength, like clarity, like you finally did something right. But one day, you might look back and feel something else. Not pride, not power, just regret. It's a strange thing, growth. You expect it to make your past feel solid. You think maturity will confirm that your old choices were wise. But sometimes it works the other way. You grow up and realize the person you were wasn't cruel, just limited. You didn't know better. You didn't see the bigger picture. You thought you were protecting yourself, and maybe you were, but you also hurt people, or you avoided things that mattered, or you walked away from something just because it scared you. Future you might look back and see a version of yourself that was loud because you were afraid of being ignored, or silent because you didn't know how to speak without shaking. Maybe you'll see how hard you tried to seem unbothered, how you wore indifference like armor. Maybe you'll see how you pushed good people away because you couldn't believe they'd stay. You'll remember moments when you rolled your eyes instead of asking questions. Times you burned bridges and called it self-respect. The decisions you make today might seem right because they keep you comfortable. They stop you from feeling weak. They help you avoid shame. But comfort can be a trap. It can convince you that you're right when you're really just scared. You might say, I don't need them, when what you mean is, I don't want to risk needing someone who might not care. You might say, I'm better off without that, when you haven't really looked at what that was. Growth requires you to revisit these things later, and it doesn't always feel good. Say you cut off a friend after a fight. They said something that touched a nerve. You reacted fast, blocked them, moved on. At the time, it felt like power. You told yourself boundaries matter, and they do. But months pass, years maybe. You look back and realize you didn't give the situation space to breathe. You didn't ask what they meant. You didn't explain how it landed. You just pulled the plug. Future you sees that now and wonders what could have been saved with a hard conversation. Or think about a job you walked out of. Maybe you felt overlooked, underpaid. Maybe you were. You quit without notice. You felt strong. But later, you remember the manager who tried to mentor you, the coworker who covered for you, the people who believed in you. You realize your exit didn't just burn a bridge. It told a story about who you were under pressure. And that story still follows you. Not because you were wrong to leave, but because of how you left. There are moments you'll replay. Moments when you made a joke at someone else's expense, when you lied to make things easier, when you pretended not to care, when you gave up too soon or held on too long. You did the best you could with the tools you had. That's true. But it doesn't stop the sting when new tools make you see old patterns more clearly. Future you might hate how long it took to say sorry. You might hate how proud you were of the version of yourself that knew how to win arguments, but not how to repair. You might hate the years you spent chasing approval from people who didn't even like you. The energy you spent proving yourself instead of becoming yourself. The time you wasted trying to be right instead of trying to understand. There's a version of you right now who feels confident, in control, clear about your values. That's not a bad thing, but don't let pride turn into blindness. Don't assume that clarity today means you'll agree with yourself tomorrow. Your perspective isn't fixed. It grows with you. And sometimes it outgrows the very beliefs you built your identity on. Think about the way you talk to people you disagree with. You might feel righteous in the moment, but will you look back and see arrogance? Think about how you end things. Do you do it with care or just with speed? Do you need to be the one who walks away just to feel like you have control? That might make sense now, but later, when you know more about conflict, about fear, about love, you might cringe at how little you knew about staying. You might even regret things you were proud of. The promotion you chased that cost you your health. The silence you kept that felt like strength but was really fear. The performance you put on that got applause but left you empty. Growth exposes the difference between what looked good and what was actually good, and it's humbling. You don't have to live in fear of regret, but you should expect it, not because you're doing everything wrong, but because growing means seeing with new eyes. It means becoming someone who knows more, feels more, and sees further. And part of that process is looking back at your old self and realizing, I didn't know what I didn't know. You can still feel proud of that person. They got you here. But you don't have to defend every choice they made. You can say, I wouldn't do that now, and still honor who you were then. Regret isn't failure. It's feedback. It means you've grown. It means you care. It means your values have deepened. And it means you're paying attention. So when you make decisions now, don't just ask, does this feel right today? Ask, will this still make sense to me when I've learned more? Try to act in ways that future you can respect, not just ways that feel strong in the moment. Because one day you'll look back. And when you do, the goal isn't to see perfection. The goal is to see someone who was honest, thoughtful, and willing to grow, even when it meant changing their mind. You think you know what you stand for. You say things like, I'd never lie, or I'd never betray someone I care about, or I'd never take that kind of job. You say it like it's solid, like it can't be moved. But values aren't walls. They're more like guidelines, easy to keep in place when life is smooth, harder when pressure builds. Everyone has a point where those guidelines start to bend. It's not always about money. Sometimes the price is approval, or comfort, or safety. Sometimes the price is fear. You tell yourself you're honest, that you speak up when something's wrong. But then you're in a meeting where a bad decision gets made and you say nothing. You don't want to be the one who makes things awkward. You think, I'll bring it up later, but you don't. And later, when the fallout comes, you realize you traded your values for belonging. You didn't mean to, it just felt easier. Or you pride yourself on loyalty. You say you're the kind of person who stands by friends, but then someone starts talking behind their back and you laugh along, not because you agree, but because silence would have felt weird. You chose the moment over the person. You didn't want to be the outsider. It happens faster than you think. A little compromise here, a small lie there, and before long, you don't like the person you've become. Say you're against exploiting others for gain. You've always said you care about fairness, but then you get a promotion, and part of the job means pushing people harder than you're comfortable with. You tell yourself, this is how it works at this level. You justify it by thinking of all the good you'll do once you've made it. But slowly, the compromises become routine. You start seeing people as numbers. You look back and realize you've become the kind of boss you used to hate. It's easy to judge other people when they break their values. It's harder to admit how close you are to doing the same. You think you'll recognize the moment, that it'll be obvious, but it won't look like a big decision. It'll look like an exception, a special case, a time when it felt okay to bend the rule. You'll tell yourself, this isn't who I really am, but your choices still count, even if you hate them. You might think, I would never betray my values. But what happens when your job's on the line? What happens when your child needs something you can't afford? What happens when telling the truth means losing someone you love? That's when the test comes, not when things are simple, but when things are personal. You'll be tempted to call it survival. You'll say, this is different. You'll say, I had no choice. And maybe you didn't, or maybe you just didn't want to live with the consequences. You'll abandon your values quietly. You won't make a speech about it. You'll justify it to yourself in private. You'll say you're being practical, that it's just once, that it's temporary. But then one choice becomes a pattern. And by the time you notice, it's already normal. The things you said you'd never do are part of your routine. The line you swore you wouldn't cross has moved. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means you're human. But the danger isn't just in slipping. It's in losing track of what you gave up and why. You can spend years defending a version of yourself that doesn't exist anymore. You keep telling yourself you're someone who lives by their values, even while your behavior says otherwise. That gap wears on you. You stop feeling proud of who you are. You start explaining things to yourself more than you explain them to others. Take someone who says they value integrity. They take a job where they're expected to stretch the truth. They hate it at first. They say it's just to pay the bills. But after a few months, it gets easier. After a year, it's automatic. Now they tell themselves, everybody does this. They stop noticing the shift. But it shows up in how they sleep, in how they talk about their work, in how disconnected they feel from their own words. Or think about someone who says they care about justice. They post about it. They vote accordingly. But then they see something unfair happening close to home, maybe at work or in their family, and they stay quiet. They don't want to make trouble. They want to keep the peace. They say, this isn't my fight. And slowly, their values become something they perform, not something they live. No one breaks their values all at once. It happens in pieces. A silent moment, and you should have spoken. A decision made without checking your gut. A lie told because the truth was too risky. Over time, you lose track of who you are trying to be. And the worst part is, no one might call you out. You might succeed. You might be praised, but inside, you'll feel the drift. You'll notice it in small ways. You'll hesitate before answering certain questions. You'll feel tired when talking about your work. You'll avoid mirrors that ask too much. Not literal mirrors, but the people and places that make you confront who you've become. You'll avoid them because you know they still see the old version of you, and you're not sure you can live up to it. There's always a price. Sometimes it's comfort. Sometimes it's status. Sometimes it's fear of being alone. Everyone has a point where something becomes more important than the thing they swore they'd never give up. You think you know what yours is, but you won't find out until it's tested. And when it is, you won't get a warning. You'll just be there, in the moment, holding the choice. You'll tell yourself a story that makes it okay, and you might even believe it until you don't. It doesn't make you weak, but it does make you responsible. Values don't stay alive just because you like them. They live when you protect them, when you act on them, even when it costs you. That cost might be small, or it might be everything. And the truth is, you won't know what kind of person you are until you've been asked to pay. You wake up and reach for your phone. You don't decide to do it, it just happens. You scroll through the same apps. You check the weather, the messages, the news. You don't remember half of what you see. You put the phone down. You get up, shower, dress. The morning passes in a blur. You're not really thinking. You're following a script you've run hundreds of times. It works. It gets you out the door. But you don't feel awake. You just feel like you're moving. Most of your day runs like this. You drive the same route. You sit at the same desk. You respond to the same emails with slightly different words. You nod in meetings. You eat lunch without tasting it. You listen while thinking about something else. At some point, you look at the clock and realize hours have passed, and you barely noticed. You were there, but not really. Something else took over. That something is autopilot. It's the brain's way of saving energy. When you do the same thing often enough, it moves the task to the background. It stops asking you to think about it. You don't have to decide how to brush your teeth, or tie your shoes, or answer, "How are you?" The routine runs itself. And that's not a flaw, it's efficient. If you had to think through every detail of every action, you'd burn out by noon. But the same system that helps you survive also makes it easy to disappear from your own life. You stop noticing your choices. You stop asking yourself what you actually want. You stop being present in your own moments, not because you're lazy, not because you don't care, but because the rhythm of the day is familiar and the brain likes what it knows. You go to work, not because you feel connected to it, but because it's what you've always done. You eat what's convenient, not what your body needs. You say, "I'm fine," even when something's off, because it's faster than explaining. You talk to people you don't really listen to. You fill the silence with noise, and you fall into bed at night, wondering where the day went. It doesn't mean you're asleep. You still solve problems. You still get things done. You still react when something urgent happens. But between the alerts and the deadlines, you drift. You start living from habit, from reaction, from impulse, and over time, you lose the sense that you're actually choosing any of it. You might feel stuck without knowing why. You say things like, "I don't know what I want anymore," or "I feel like I'm just getting through the week." You feel tired, but rest doesn't fix it. You try to make changes, a new hobby, a new schedule, maybe a short trip, but the dullness follows you. It's not the world that's flat, it's the way you're moving through it. Imagine driving home and realizing you don't remember half the drive. You didn't crash. You followed the signs, but your mind was somewhere else. That's how most of life feels when you're on autopilot. You show up, you keep the machine running, but you don't feel the road under you. You don't see what's passing by. You answer messages with the same phrases. You make small talk without interest. You keep saying yes to things you don't want. You keep avoiding things that matter, not out of fear, but out of routine. You stopped checking in with yourself a while ago. The decisions you make now aren't based on need or hope. They're based on what's already in motion. Even your emotions start running on scripts. You feel stressed in traffic, not because the delay matters, but because it's the usual reaction. You feel frustrated at work, not because anything new went wrong, but because you've grown used to resenting your job. You say you're bored on weekends, but you don't try anything different. You don't ask what would actually make the day feel alive. Relationships suffer too. You talk without depth. You listen without hearing. You spend time together without being together. You say, "How was your day?" without meaning it. You kiss goodbye like it's part of a checklist. You miss chances to connect because you don't see them. You're not paying attention. Not really. None of this is extreme. It's not crisis. It's quiet. It's numbness. It's days that blur together. It's a sense of something missing, even when nothing's wrong. And it's hard to fix because it doesn't feel urgent. It feels normal. You don't snap out of autopilot by changing everything. That's not how the brain works. You start by noticing, by catching yourself mid-habit and asking, is this what I want right now? You start by slowing down in small moments, eating without a screen, driving without music, walking without a phone. You let your attention land, even for 5 minutes. You feel the water in the shower. You taste your food. You look people in the eye. Say you're sitting in a meeting. Instead of zoning out or thinking about lunch, you focus on what's being said. You ask a question, not because it makes you look good, but because you're actually curious. That moment is small, but it breaks the loop. It says, I'm here. Or think about a friend who's talking about something real. You stop waiting for your turn to speak. You just listen, fully. No planning, no judging. You let their words hit. You feel the difference between hearing and being present. You remember it. You want more of it. This shift is subtle. It doesn't change your whole life overnight, but it brings your life back into focus. You start noticing what you avoid. You start seeing what you settle for. You start asking questions you used to ignore. Not because you're in crisis, but because you're waking up. Autopilot will always be there. It's built in. But you don't have to let it run everything. You don't have to live the same day over and over. The pause between moments, the space where choice lives, that's where you find yourself again. You don't need a map. You need to look up. Take your hands off the wheel for a second. Ask if you're even going where you meant to go. You try to explain yourself. You pick the right words. You slow down. You give context. You think if you're clear enough, careful enough, honest enough, someone will get it, really get it. But they nod too soon, or they change the subject, or they say, I know how you feel, and then tell a story that isn't close. You sit there, quiet, knowing you weren't heard. You tried, but the thing you meant is still locked inside you, untouched. You felt this since you were a kid. You had thoughts you didn't share. You asked questions no one around you asked. You noticed things others missed. You learned to keep it to yourself. Maybe you spoke up once and got laughed at. Maybe you were told you were overthinking, or too sensitive, or not making sense. So you started editing yourself. You shared the version of you they could handle. The rest stayed inside. Even now, you do this. You tell part of the truth, but not all. You test the water before saying what you really mean. You check their face for signs of confusion or boredom. You backtrack when they look uncomfortable. You laugh when you're not amused, just to make it easier. You simplify what matters to you because most people don't want to dig that deep. And if you're honest, sometimes you don't either. It's tiring to keep trying. You want to be known, not liked, not praised. Known. You want someone to see the way you think, the way you feel, the way you carry things. You want them to notice what you don't say, to hear the silence behind your answers, to read between your lines and ask, is that the full story? You want them to stay when it gets strange or heavy or hard. But that's rare, and you know it. People see pieces of you. They know what you do, what you say, how you look when you're tired, how you act under pressure. But they don't see the things you hold back, the memories that shaped you, the thoughts you keep walking around in your head, the stories that still sting. They don't see the version of you that exists in quiet moments, when you're driving alone or lying awake at night, or watching rain hit a window. Even the people closest to you don't fully know you. They know patterns, habits, reactions, but not the full depth, not the quiet shifts inside. You could be grieving something and still laugh at dinner. You could be changing in ways they don't see. You could be dreaming about a life they've never imagined for you. But they still speak to the old version, the one you've already outgrown. You've tried to explain it. You've written it out. You've sent long messages. You've told someone, I've never said this out loud before. And sometimes they listen. They try. But something gets lost in translation. It's not their fault. Language is limited. Feelings don't fit cleanly into words. You reach for the best way to say it, and it still comes out incomplete. You feel the gap between what you said and what you meant. You see it on their face. They might care. They might love you. But even love can't erase that gap. You don't live in the same mind. You don't carry the same past. They don't see how long you stared at the message before sending it. They don't hear the way a phrase echoes in your memory. They don't feel the weight you carry when everything looks fine on the outside. They love you from the outside in, but you live from the inside out, and that difference stays. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to be fully understood. You picture someone listening and getting every detail right. You think about saying something and not having to explain the layers. You want to feel mirrored, reflected, recognized. You want to be able to rest in that. But even in the best relationships, there's a line, a point where the other person nods but doesn't feel it like you do. And that line doesn't go away. This doesn't mean you're isolated. You can still feel close to people. You can laugh, connect, share moments that matter. You can love and be loved. But some part of you will always be yours alone. Some thoughts you won't be able to put into words. Some feelings won't make sense even to you. Some memories you'll keep to yourself, not out of secrecy, but because they lose their shape when you speak them. And when you die, people will tell stories about you. They'll remember how you made them feel, what you said, what you did. They'll guess at your motives. They'll describe you in ways that only partly land. They'll say things like, "She was always like this," or "He would have wanted that," and you'll have no way to correct them. You'll be turned into a version that makes sense to them, not the full version. Just the one they could hold. This can sound bleak, but it's not a flaw in you. It's part of being alive. No one escapes it. Every person you've ever met has a version of you in their mind that isn't quite right. And you have versions of them too. You assume things. You miss cues. You put people in roles they didn't choose. You hear their words through the filter of your own life. Just like they do with you. You spend your life building a self, layer by layer, thought by thought, but no one else sees the full structure. They see glimpses through windows. They hear footsteps. They get pieces. That's all anyone ever gets. So you speak anyway. You share what you can. You try to close the gap, even knowing it won't close fully. You leave notes behind, things you've written, things you've made, stories you've told. You try to shape your own version, but even that version will be misread. Someone will read your words and miss the tone. Someone will hold your photo and project something onto it. That's how it goes. You will die misunderstood, not because you failed, but because that's the nature of being a person in a world full of other people, each locked in their own private world. And still, you try. Still, you speak. Still, you reach. Not to be fully known, but to be known enough. You wait for something to change. You think maybe it's around the corner. Maybe someone will notice. Maybe someone will step in. Someone older, wiser, stronger. Someone with answers. You imagine them walking in, seeing how tired you are, how much you've carried. You don't even need them to fix it all, just to say, "I see it, I've got you." That thought keeps you going, but it's not real. No one's coming. It starts young. You get hurt, someone rushes in. You fall, someone picks you up. You cry, someone soothes you. You learn that pain draws help, and sometimes it does, but not always. And as you get older, the people who once stepped in start pulling back. They tell you to be strong, to figure it out, to be responsible. You tell yourself the same thing, but some part of you still waits. Some part of you still believes that one day, someone will show up and carry the load. You wait in different ways. You stay in a job that drains you because you think someone will notice your effort and offer you something better. You stay quiet in a relationship that feels off because you think the other person will change without being asked. You don't make a decision because you think the right path will reveal itself without you having to choose. You stall, you drift, you freeze. You say, "I'm stuck," but really, you're waiting. You tell yourself it's not the right time, that you need more clarity, more support, more confidence. You wait for the fear to leave. You wait to feel sure, but it doesn't come. And while you wait, nothing changes. The weight stays, the job stays, the fear stays. You're not lazy, you're not weak. You just grew up believing someone would eventually step in if it got too hard. But no one's coming. You want a guide, someone to tell you what to do, to say this way, to give you permission to want what you want, to give you a reason to try. You want someone to believe in you more than you believe in yourself. You want to borrow their strength, even just for a little while. But strength doesn't come that way. No one can hand it to you. You build it, alone. Picture yourself sitting in a room. The walls are closing in. You call out. No one answers. You wait longer. Maybe you scream. Nothing. You realize the only way out is to stand up and push. No one's coming with a key. No one's going to knock down the wall for you. It's you, only you. And that's the truth you don't want, but it's also the one that can save you. You don't have to do everything at once. You don't need a full plan, but you do need to move. You need to stop waiting for the right mood, or the right sign, or the right person. You need to say, I'll do what I can with what I have. You need to say, even if I fail, at least I tried. You stop waiting for help, and you become someone who helps themselves. That shift changes everything. Maybe that means applying for jobs even though rejection scares you. Maybe it means setting a boundary and sticking to it. Maybe it means asking a hard question, knowing the answer might hurt. Maybe it means admitting you're not happy and letting that truth move you. You act, not because someone told you to, but because you're tired of waiting. You're tired of hoping that someone else will fix what only you can face. It's not easy. There's no applause. No one will appear to say, well done. You'll have days where you wish the old dream was still true, where you wish someone would just carry you. But there's power in choosing to stand up anyway. Power in doing the work with no guarantee. You earn something deeper than comfort. You earn your own respect. Think of someone you admire, not because they're rich or famous, but because they carry themselves with quiet strength. They're calm under pressure. They don't make excuses. They don't wait for someone to tell them they're ready. That's not because they had more support. It's because they stopped waiting. They took the hit. They figured it out. They moved forward, scared and unsure, but willing. That can be you. You won't always feel strong. You'll make mistakes. You'll have moments where you want to crawl back to the old belief that someone else will fix it. But you'll remember what it felt like to move, to act, to decide. You'll remember that even a small step is louder than 1,000 silent hopes. You'll stop needing someone to choose you. You'll choose yourself. This doesn't mean you can't ask for help or lean on people, but it does mean the first move is always yours. No one can save you if you're not willing to save yourself. No one can carry you if you won't stand. You might find support along the way. You might meet people who lift you, but they'll be walking beside you, not in front of you. The rescue fantasy dies hard. You might still wait for the message, the call, the moment. But when you realize it's not coming, don't feel hopeless. Feel clear. Feel ready. Feel awake. You're not stuck because the world is against you. You're stuck because you've been told to wait, and now you know better. No one's coming, but you are. You've heard it before. You have so much potential. You're smart. You're creative. You have a great mind for ideas. You could do anything. And maybe that's true, but it doesn't matter. Potential is just the start. It's like having a full tank of gas and never turning on the engine. What you could do only matters if you do it. You sit with a notebook. You sketch ideas, write fragments, start outlines. You have half a novel, a few business plans, some songs, maybe a script. You think about them often. They feel real in your head. You can see what they might become. You picture the finished work, the praise, the impact, but the page stays blank or half filled. You stop before it gets hard. You tell yourself you'll come back to it. You don't. It's not a talent problem. You have what you need. You just don't move. You tell yourself you're waiting for the right time, for energy, for space, for clarity. But months go by, then years, and the thing you once saw as a sure part of your future becomes something you barely bring up anymore. Not because it stopped mattering, but because you feel embarrassed that it still does and you've done nothing about it. Potential feels good. It makes you special without asking anything from you. It gives you a way to feel proud without facing failure. People say, you're going places, and you believe it, but you're not going anywhere unless you do the work. Potential without effort is just a story, and stories don't build anything. Work does. Imagine someone with a perfect swing who never picks up a bat. Imagine someone with an ear for music who never learns to play. No one watches them and says, that's greatness. They say, that's wasted. Potential doesn't get better with time. It fades. You forget how to use it. You lose the edge. You see people with less talent passing you, not because they're lucky, but because they showed up and did the work. You might say you don't have the time, but you do. You have hours where you scroll or worry or replay the same thought. You say you don't know where to start, but you do. You start with what you have. You start badly. You say you don't feel ready, but no one ever does. Readiness comes after action, not before it. Let's say you want to write. You've had the idea in your head for years. You talk about it, you imagine it, but you don't write. Maybe you wrote 5 pages once and hated them. Maybe you stopped after a week, but now it's been a year, maybe more, and the idea still lingers. So here's the truth. If you haven't written, you're not a writer. You're someone who could be. The only way to close that gap is to sit down and write, even if it's bad, especially if it's bad. Or say you have a mind for business. People tell you you'd be great at it. You see gaps in the market. You know how to pitch, but you've never started anything. You talk about it often. You get excited, then overwhelmed. You wait for the right idea to click into place. You wait until you're less afraid, but you stay where you are. Another year goes by. Nothing's built. You're still potential, not product. There's no reward for almost. No one remembers what you could have done. They see what's finished. They see what's out there. That doesn't mean it has to be perfect. It just has to exist. If you sing but never record, no one hears you. If you code but never launch, no one uses what you make. If you think but never write, no one reads it. The work only matters if you deliver it. You might fear judgment. You might think, what if it's not good enough? But that fear hides a deeper truth. You're more afraid of trying and failing than never trying at all. Because if you don't try, you get to keep the dream intact. You get to say, I could have, but that's not real safety. That's a slow decay. Every day you avoid the work, the thing you love starts to feel like a burden. Not because it's heavy, but because you've let it sit untouched for too long. Think about someone who's doing what you want to do. You think they're lucky or naturally driven, but odds are they just kept going. They didn't wait to be chosen. They chose themselves. They didn't know the outcome, but they acted anyway. And that's the difference. Not potential, discipline, commitment, a willingness to be seen trying. You might say, I'm not ready to show people yet. That's fine. You don't have to share the first draft, but you do have to make it. You do have to risk failure in private before you earn anything in public. People respect output, not plans, not promises, results. Even small ones, a page, a demo, a prototype, something someone else can see and touch and react to. You want to be respected. You want to be known, but you're waiting to be discovered instead of making something worth discovering. You think someone will come along and push you, but they won't. The people who go far are the ones who moved first, who failed quietly, who showed up when no one asked them to. You become one of them by starting and then starting again. Potential is a nice word, but it's empty if it never turns into action. You don't get points for thinking about it. You get points for doing it. You don't need a plan. You don't need approval. You don't need the perfect conditions. You need a first step, and then another, and another after that. So whatever it is, start it. Finish something, even if it's messy, even if it's not what you hoped. Done is always better than imagined. Action turns you into who you say you are. Until then, you're just waiting, and no one rewards waiting. You know something's off. You feel it in your body before you admit it in your head. a tightness in your chest, a hesitation when you speak, the dull discomfort that follows you through the day. But instead of facing it, you push it down. You stay busy. You tell yourself it's not a big deal. You don't look too closely, because the truth is there, waiting, and you don't want to feel what it might bring. You've done this before. You've stayed in friendships long past their value. You've told yourself a job was fine, even when you felt dead inside. You've said we're okay in a relationship that hasn't felt safe in months. You've smiled when you wanted to scream. You've laughed when something stung, because facing the truth means doing something with it, and comfort almost always wins. Comfort is easy. It's familiar. It lets you float. You don't have to explain anything. You don't have to make changes. You don't have to hurt anyone's feelings. You tell yourself that staying quiet is kinder, that things might improve on their own, that it's better not to stir things up. So you ignore the feeling. You smooth over the sharp edges. You tell yourself you're being mature, patient, thoughtful, but you're not. You're avoiding. Say your partner stops listening to you. They nod, but they don't engage. They stop asking how your day went. You feel the distance, but you don't mention it. You don't want to start a fight. You don't want to hear that maybe they've checked out, so you act like things are fine. You keep up the routine. You talk about dinner plans instead of connection. Deep down, you know what's happening. But truth means change, and change means loss. So you stay quiet. Or maybe your work has stopped challenging you. You don't care about the projects anymore. You get through the day on autopilot. You feel yourself slipping, showing up later, doing less, caring less. You know you've outgrown the role, but quitting means risk. It means discomfort. You might have to explain yourself to people who won't understand. You might have to start over. So you stay. You tell yourself it's just a phase. You give it another 6 months, then another. Years go by. You do this with yourself too. You say, I'm fine, when you're not. You downplay what you feel. You avoid mirrors, avoid questions, avoid stillness. You stay on your phone. You say you're tired. You say you're busy. You do anything to stay out of your own head. Because if you stop moving, the truth might speak up, and you're not ready to hear it. Truth is sharp. It cuts through the noise. It doesn't care if you're comfortable. It doesn't care if it ruins your plans. It just shows up. And once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. That's why you avoid it. Not because you're weak, but because you know what it costs. Once you admit the friendship is one-sided, you can't keep texting like it's not. Once you admit your dream has changed, you can't keep chasing the old one. Once you admit you're lonely, you can't keep acting like solitude is strength. You think honesty will break everything, but dishonesty breaks you. Slowly, quietly, it eats at you. You get resentful, then distant. You get snappy with people who didn't do anything wrong. You blame stress, or hormones, or lack of sleep. But what you're really carrying is the weight of what you won't admit. The truth that wants out but keeps getting buried. Sometimes the truth is simple. You don't love them anymore. You don't like your job. You're not okay. You don't believe in what you're doing. You want something different. You miss someone. You regret something. You're scared. These aren't complex truths, but they threaten your comfort. They threaten the identity you've built, the relationships you've protected, the plans you've made. So you ignore them and they fester. You're not lying, not exactly. You're just not telling the full story. You give people the parts they can handle. You say what keeps things stable. You offer just enough truth to look honest, but the deeper parts stay hidden. Sometimes you hide them from yourself. You rewrite the memory. You downplay the moment. You reshape the story to protect yourself from the pain. But pain doesn't go away when you hide from it. It waits. It leaks out. You snap at someone over nothing. You feel empty in places that used to be full. You lose interest in things you used to love. You don't know why, but your body knows. Your body always knows when you're not living honestly. Imagine going to the doctor with a deep cut and telling them it's just a scratch. You walk out with a bandage when you needed stitches. That's what avoiding truth does. You minimize something real and then act confused when it doesn't heal. Truth costs you comfort, but it gives you clarity. When you admit something is broken, you can start to fix it. When you admit you're lost, you can start to look. When you admit what you want, you can start to move toward it. It's not easy. You might lose people. You might disappoint them. You might have to sit with guilt or grief or fear. But at least you'll be facing the right direction. You don't have to say it all at once. You don't have to tell everyone everything. But you do have to start with yourself. Say it in your head. Say it in a journal. Say it in a whisper. This isn't working. I'm not happy. I need something else. That's the beginning. Not of chaos, but of alignment. Of getting your inner life and your outer life to match. Comfort will always pull you back. It will say, stay here. It's not that bad. And maybe it's not. But not that bad is not enough. Not for a whole life. Not if you want peace that lasts longer than a moment. Not if you want to live with your eyes open. So the question is never just, what's true? It's, what am I willing to see, even if it hurts? Because truth hurts, but not as much as living without it. You think you're thinking, but most of the time, you're reacting. You feel something in your body, a spike, a pull, a drop, and your mind builds a story around it. You call it logic. You call it a decision. But underneath, it's instinct. You're not as rational as you think. No one is. You're just an animal that learned to talk. You want to believe you're in control, that you make choices based on reason, that you weigh facts. But watch yourself. Someone walks into the room and you don't like them. You don't know why. You make a face, shift your posture. Your stomach turns. Later you say, something felt off. That's instinct. You smelled tension. You picked up on posture, tone, timing, signals too fast for language. Your brain made meaning afterward. The body led. Same thing with desire. You think attraction is about values or character, but most of it starts before you know their name. It's voice pitch, face symmetry, movement. It's the way someone smells, not perfume, but actual scent. Pheromones. That reaction you call chemistry is your brain lighting up from a mix of cues that evolution taught it to chase. You can explain it later with words like connection or energy, but the reaction came first. The words came after. You look at someone scrolling their phone at dinner and you get annoyed. Not because it's rude, but because you feel ignored. Rejection, even small, activates something old in you. It feels like exile, like being left behind, like losing your place in the group. That used to mean danger. Loneliness wasn't just hard, it was fatal. Your nervous system remembers. It fires the alarm and you lash out or shut down. You think it's about phones. It's not. It's about survival. Hunger too. You eat fast when you're stressed, not because you're hungry, but because your body thinks there's a threat. It wants energy, fast. It doesn't trust the environment. You crave salt, fat, sugar, quick fuel. Your stomach doesn't numb the show. Your fear does. And when the fear passes, you realize you weren't hungry at all. Even status is animal. You think ambition is noble. You think success is a sign of intelligence. But watch how you light up when someone praises you. Watch how you tense up when someone questions you in front of others. You say it doesn't matter. You act cool, but inside, your brain tracks every nod, every laugh, every raised eyebrow. You scan for dominance, for rank. You want to win, or at least not lose. That's not a choice. That's instinct. You form groups. You defend your group. You feel a flash of anger when someone from another group criticizes yours. You say it's about ideas, but it's not. It's about belonging. Being part of something meant survival. Being cast out meant death. You still carry that wiring. That's why arguments online feel like threats. That's why facts don't change minds. Once identity is involved, reason takes a back seat. Fear controls more than you think. You take the safe route, not the best one. You don't speak up, not because you don't care, but because your body tells you to stay small. Avoid risk, avoid rejection. Even in situations where the risk is social, not physical, your system reacts the same way. It braces. It shuts down parts of you. Your voice gets tight. Your hands sweat. You call it anxiety, but it's your body trying to protect you. You're not weak. You're wired for survival. Jealousy too. You see someone succeed and you flinch. You want to be happy for them, but there's a flash of threat, a sense that there's less left for you. Scarcity lives in your bones. Your rational mind knows that someone else's success doesn't take from yours, but your body reacts before thought. You tense, you compare, you judge. Then you catch yourself and feel ashamed. But that first wave wasn't chosen. It just happened. You chase pleasure. You avoid pain. That's your baseline. Every screen you swipe, every snack you grab, every shortcut you take, it's all in service of feeling better now. You can dress it up in big ideas. You can say it's about freedom, or self-care, or goals. But underneath, it's simple. You're wired to seek comfort. You're wired to move away from anything that feels like suffering. You like stories that confirm your instincts. You call it truth. But mostly, it's pattern recognition. You favor data that fits your worldview. You ignore what doesn't. Not because you're dishonest, but because certainty feels safer than doubt. You're not built to be neutral. You're built to survive. That means quick decisions. That means loyalty to the familiar. It takes real effort to override that. Even memory isn't clean. You think you remember what happened, but mostly you remember how it felt. You edit details to fit the emotion. You highlight threat. You downplay peace. That's why you hold on to arguments and forget compliments. Pain marks you deeper. It lasts longer. Because in the wild, remembering what hurt you kept you alive. You want to believe you're better than this, that you've evolved past it. But evolution doesn't care about comfort. It cares about function. And the system you use today was built for a world of danger, hunger, and tribe. You're using Stone Age wiring in a digital age world, and it's doing its best. But it wasn't made for this. That's not an excuse. It's a fact. You can still learn, still grow, still pause before reacting. But first, you have to admit what's real. You're not a mind with a body. You're a body with a mind attached. You can meditate, you can reflect, you can read. But when something loud enough hits, pain, joy, anger, your body moves before your mind can catch up. This isn't weakness, it's design. Knowing it helps you see clearly, helps you notice when instinct pulls the wheel, helps you slow down just enough to ask, what's really driving this? Not so you can rise above it, but so you can live with it. Eyes open, instinct acknowledged, choices made anyway. You care when one person suffers. You see a single child in pain and something in you tightens. You stop scrolling. You picture their fear. You imagine what they need. You feel the urge to help. But the moment that one turns into 10,000, something changes. You go numb. The numbers blur. The pain becomes data. It's not that you don't care. It's that you can't feel it anymore. Empathy breaks down at scale. This isn't new. It's how your mind works. You're built to respond to the immediate, the specific. You can hold one face in your thoughts, one name, one story. But once it turns into a group, a region, a country, your ability to care falls apart. You can read that 1 million people lost everything, and it won't hit you as hard as one video of a single family crying on a sidewalk. That's not weakness, it's wiring. Your nervous system evolved in small groups. You knew everyone. You could help or hurt in ways that felt direct. Now you're asked to witness suffering at a scale your brain never planned for. You scroll past war zones and floods while eating lunch. You can't absorb it all, so you don't. You protect yourself by not feeling. But this protection becomes a problem, because when the numbers get big, decisions shift. Leaders talk about civilians as collateral. Bombs fall on neighborhoods. Factories pollute rivers. Laws strip rights from entire populations. And it all sounds abstract, necessary, efficient. You don't hear screams in the reports. You hear policy. You hear cost. You hear strategy. The horror is buried in language. Distance helps. Most cruelty depends on it. It's easy to approve of violence when you don't have to watch it up close. Drones make war clean. Prisons hide punishment. Outsourced labor hides poverty. You buy what's cheap without asking who made it. You eat what's easy without asking how it was raised. You don't see the hands behind the system. You don't see the bruises. So you don't stop to think. When cruelty scales, it organizes. It builds rules. It wears suits. It files reports. The worst things humans have done were done through systems, through desks and phones and clean offices. Genocide wasn't just bullets. It was lists. It was trains. It was paperwork. Slavery wasn't just whips. It was contracts. It was profit. Every atrocity had people behind it who said, "I'm just doing my job." Cruelty thrives when no one feels responsible. You imagine evil as loud, obvious, monsters and villains. But most of it is quiet, boring, executed by people who believe they're doing what needs to be done. They sleep at night. They tell themselves they're reasonable. They have families, routines, calendars. They listen to music on the way to work. They think of themselves as good, and the rest of us let it happen, not because we agree, but because we're tired, distracted, busy. Or because we think it's too big to change. And maybe it is, but that doesn't stop the damage. Cruelty doesn't wait for your attention. It moves forward either way. You see this online too. One cruel comment becomes hundreds, piling on someone who made a mistake. The crowd says they deserve it. They forget there's a person on the other side of the screen. Someone reading every word, shaking, hiding, maybe breaking. But at scale, empathy dies. You don't feel their face. You feel your rage. You feel the momentum of the group. That momentum makes monsters out of ordinary people. The same thing happens in groups offline. A mob, a movement, a riot. Someone throws the first punch, then the rest follow. Not because they're violent by nature, but because they feel invisible. They feel protected by the crowd. The line between them and what they do disappears. You're no longer you. You're us. And us can justify almost anything. Even silence can be cruel. People see something wrong and say nothing. Not because they agree, but because speaking up is risky. Because no one else is saying anything. Because cruelty has numbers on its side. You wait for someone else to go first. And while you wait, someone else suffers. History proves this again and again. People allowed horrors to happen in their own cities. They looked away. They followed orders. They stayed quiet. Some told themselves they didn't know. Some knew and didn't care. Some cared but froze. Scale made it feel unreal, made the victims seem distant, made the system feel untouchable. Cruelty also adapts. It wears new clothes. It learns to smile. It uses words like freedom and progress. It claims to protect. It hides behind laws and flags and markets. It convinces good people that bad things are normal, that pain is just part of the price, that someone else will deal with it, that it's too late now anyway. And yet, one person can still feel. One person can still break through the fog, can still sit with the pain of another, can still say, "This isn't right." But that one person often feels alone. Power doesn't like emotion. It wants silence. It wants order. So it punishes those who feel too much, who care too much, who refuse to play along. You want to believe people are good, and many are. One-on-one, kindness is everywhere. Strangers help each other. Neighbors pitch in. People give, heal, comfort. But scale breaks that. It dulls it. Systems push kindness to the edges, turn it into charity instead of justice. And charity can't keep up. The deeper truth is hard to hold. Humanity is capable of terrible things. Not just a few people. Not just the obvious villains. Everyone. Given the right pressure, the right story, the right distance. We all have the capacity. It doesn't mean we act on it, but we carry it. And pretending we don't is what lets it grow. You want a better world. You want peace, fairness, dignity. But those things don't come from hope alone. They come from staring cruelty in the face and refusing to look away, from knowing what we're capable of and choosing different, even when it's slow, even when it's small, even when no one else seems to care. Because at scale, cruelty thrives, but at scale, resistance can too. If enough people choose to feel, to act, to not go numb. You hear it all the time. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. People nod like it's wisdom. But the truth is, we don't repeat history because we forget. We repeat it because we stop caring. The records are there, the warnings are clear, the patterns are visible, but knowing isn't the same as doing. And memory doesn't mean action. You learn about past wars, genocide, collapse. You study how hate spreads, how rights are taken, how fear turns neighbor against neighbor. It's all in the books, in the photos, in the headlines from decades ago. But when the signs return, slowly, then all at once, people shrug. They say, it's not the same. They say, that could never happen here. They say, it's complicated. So it begins again. It happens in plain sight. A leader blames a group for the country's problems. They tighten laws. They push propaganda. They reward loyalty and punish dissent. You've seen this before. The slogans change, but the structure stays the same. First, there's fear, then anger, then division, then violence. And by the time people call it what it is, the damage is done. You might think, we're more informed now, but that doesn't stop it. Information doesn't equal wisdom. We have access to more facts than ever, and still choose comfort over truth. We scroll past atrocities. We argue over language. We call violence policy and injustice debate. The facts are right there. We just don't want to feel them. Sometimes the forgetting is slow. A country moves on from its crimes without making amends. It renames things. It builds new statues. It changes the subject. Generations grow up without learning the full story. They hear versions with the edges sanded off. They're taught pride without pain. And once enough time passes, the lie becomes the truth. Take colonization. Entire nations were built through invasion, theft, slavery. It's not a theory. It's documented. But ask people today and they'll say, that was a long time ago. Or, we didn't do that. Or, it wasn't that bad. The records are there, but the will to face them is not. So the same logic, conquer, extract, exploit, keeps going under new names: development, investment, security. Or look at how we treat the poor. Every economic collapse has a pattern: unchecked greed, fake growth, inequality. We know how it starts. We know who pays the price. But each time, people say, this time is different. The system crashes. Bailouts go to the top. The bottom falls out. Then after a few years, we do it again. Because the profits were too good to question. Because we didn't care enough to change it. The same goes for climate. Warnings go back decades. Scientists, activists, frontline communities, they've been shouting for years. We've seen the floods, fires, droughts. We've seen species vanish. We know the numbers, but we burn more, dig deeper, build bigger. We say, technology will fix it, or it's too late now, or someone else will deal with it. So nothing changes, and the damage grows. It's not just systems, it's people. Families forget too. Abuse gets buried. Patterns go unnamed. You grow up in chaos, and if no one talks about it, you pass it down. You might swear, I'll never be like them. But if you don't understand how it started, if you don't face the pain, you repeat it in new forms. You become the person you once feared. Not because you forgot, but because silence shaped you. Even movements forget. People fight for justice, then lose momentum. The signs come down. The chants fade. New leaders rise and say, let's be practical. And the sharp edges of truth get rounded off. People stop organizing. They say, things are better now. But better doesn't mean done. And if you don't keep pushing, the same forces that caused the problem will return. Stronger, more careful, harder to spot. You think you'll recognize tyranny. You think you'll stop injustice early. But it never looks like a monster at first. It looks like a joke, a headline, a policy change, a delay in the courts, a small thing that's not worth fighting today. And then it's bigger. Then it's law. Then it's culture. By the time it looks like the past, it's already the present. And the people who spoke up early are gone, or quiet, or punished. It's not about intelligence, it's about comfort. We resist truth that hurts, especially if it asks something of us, especially if it threatens what we think we've earned. That's why history repeats, not because we lack knowledge, but because we lack courage to name what's wrong, to face what it means, to act before it's safe. You'll hear people say, let's move forward. They mean well, but forward isn't progress if you carry the same damage with you. Healing takes more than time. It takes honesty. It takes accountability. And those things are hard. They don't feel good. But without them, the wound stays, and anything unhealed eventually shows up again. So what do? First, we stop pretending forgetting is harmless. It's not. It's how harm survives. It's how power resets. We stop waiting for perfect proof. We stop asking if it's bad enough yet. We trust our gut when it says, I've seen this before. We name it, we study it, we stay with it. You don't have to know every detail, but you have to care enough to look. You have to care enough to teach your kids the truth, not the story that makes you feel proud. You have to care enough to challenge your friends when they rewrite the past. You have to care enough to ask, again and again, who benefits from this forgetting? Because someone always does. Someone always profits when pain is buried, when records are erased, when the past gets repackaged. They count on your silence, your short memory, your need to move on. They don't worry about you fighting. They worry about you remembering. A child wakes up hungry, not just missed breakfast hungry, but body weak, stomach aching, can't focus hungry. There's no food in the house. Or maybe there is, but it's not for them. Maybe the food belongs to a parent with a short temper. Or maybe it goes to a younger sibling who cries louder. The child puts on yesterday's clothes, walks to school if school still happens, and sits in a classroom trying to focus while their body screams for something, anything, to eat. Another child wakes up to shouting. Fists pounding walls, doors slammed. Fear floods their body before their feet touch the floor. They move quietly, carefully, learning how to be invisible. They know which floorboards squeak. They know which moods are dangerous. They know that silence isn't safety. It just means the next explosion hasn't hit yet. Children suffer every day, everywhere, in quiet houses and crowded shelters, in cities, towns, villages. In war zones and wealthy neighborhoods. Some are hit, some are ignored, some are trafficked, some are kept alive, but never really seen. They go to school with bruises, hidden under sleeves. They walk home alone. They care for siblings, like parents. They lie for the adults who hurt them. They learn early that adults don't always protect. Sometimes adults are the ones they need protection from. You see a child begging at an intersection. You glance. Maybe you feel something. Pity. Guilt. Discomfort. You look away. You tell yourself it's not safe to give money, that it's not your place, that there's probably a system somewhere that's supposed to help. Then the light turns green and you drive away. Or you read about a bombing in a country you couldn't place on a map. Dozens dead, children among them. The headline says it, the photo shows it. You scroll past it because it feels too far, too big, too constant. There's always another photo, another number, another child. You stop reacting because reacting all the time would break you. You hear someone joke, kids these days have it easy. They don't mean harm. They're talking about phones, or schools, or how polite children used to be. They don't see the contradiction. How children are expected to be resilient, obedient, grateful, while still being told they don't understand the world. But some kids understand more than they should. They understand fear. They understand shame. They understand what it means to be the problem before they've done anything wrong. Children are born into situations they didn't choose. They grow up in systems designed by adults who argue about budgets, not outcomes. A child in foster care moves from home to home, carrying a plastic bag with all they own. A child in a refugee camp sleeps in a tent, listens to gunfire, dreams in broken languages. A child in a clean suburban home is taught to smile, to hide, to play the part while pain festers behind closed doors. Even children who aren't hit or starved still suffer. Emotional neglect doesn't leave bruises, but it leaves scars. Kids need to be seen, heard, touched with care. When they're not, they learn they don't matter. They learn to perform, to be easy, to not ask for too much. A child praised for being quiet may not be okay. They may just know that noise gets punished. In schools, kids act out. They fight, they cry, they shut down. Adults call them disruptive, lazy, disrespectful. But behavior is communication. A child throwing a chair might be begging for help. A child refusing to speak might be trying to stay safe. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with you?" the better question is, "What happened to you?" But those questions take time, patience, resources. Systems don't move fast for children. Teachers are overwhelmed. Social workers carry impossible caseloads. Politicians cut funding. Media moves on. The world looks away, not because it doesn't care, but because it has too many excuses. There's always a reason to delay, always another crisis that pulls attention, always another adult voice saying, "We're doing our best." But the child doesn't wait. The child lives each day now. The damage happens now, and the effects last. Childhood trauma rewires the brain. It changes how kids learn, trust, relate. It shows up later as addiction, violence, illness, avoidance, depression. Some kids make it through, others don't. And for most, the pain doesn't stop just because they age out of the system. It follows them, shapes them, silently. Some people say, "Well, I had it rough too, and I turned out fine." But fine isn't the measure. Fine means you survived. It doesn't mean you healed. It doesn't mean it was okay. Some children survive by becoming small. Others survive by becoming angry. Some grow into adults who never feel safe unless they control everything. Others grow into adults who don't feel worthy unless they sacrifice themselves for others. All of that started somewhere. You don't have to be a parent to protect children. You don't have to be a teacher or a therapist. You just have to stop looking away. Listen when a child speaks. Believe them when they say something hurts. Step in when you see cruelty passed off as discipline. Speak up when you hear someone mock a child's pain. Don't excuse it. Don't minimize it. Don't joke about it. Children hear everything, and they remember. We talk about children like they're the future, but they're people now. They have inner lives now. They feel pain now, and the world barely flinches. If adults suffered what children suffer, daily hunger, daily fear, daily neglect, it would be called a crisis. For children, it's called growing up. It doesn't have to be this way, but it is. And as long as we look away, it stays this way. Until we decide that a child's suffering is not acceptable, not normal, not just part of life, nothing changes. They suffer, quietly, daily, while the world shrugs and moves on. You think you're a good person. You try to treat people fairly. You believe in kindness, honesty, maybe justice. You tell yourself you'd never lie, cheat, betray, or hurt someone who didn't deserve it. You believe this because you've lived most of your life with enough time, space, and resources to feel in control. But stress changes things. Pressure doesn't just reveal your values, it tests how much of them were real. You act one way when you're calm, another when you're cornered. You want to believe your choices come from reason. But reason takes time, and stress strips time away. It shrinks your world. Your thinking narrows. You focus on risk, on escape, on survival. You stop seeing people clearly. You start seeing problems, obstacles, threats. You do what you have to do, or what you think you have to do, and later you don't recognize yourself. Take a parent who hasn't slept in 3 nights. Their baby won't stop crying. There's no help, no break. They believe in patience. They believe in gentle parenting. But something cracks. They yell, or shake, or slam a door. Not because they stopped loving the child, but because stress pushed their body past its limit. And the values they held so tightly felt far away in that moment. Or think about someone caring for a sick parent. They balance work, money, medicine, emotions. They snap at the nurse. They lie to their boss. They start cutting corners, not because they've become cruel, but because they're drowning. The part of them that once held firm lines has softened. They're not trying to justify it, but stress doesn't care about justification. It breaks down structure, and what's left isn't always pretty. Look at history. In every conflict, every crisis, people who once seemed decent did terrible things. Not because they were born violent, but because fear and stress reshaped their moral compass. They said, "I had no choice." And in some ways, they believed it. Their world had shrunk to danger and safety, and they picked safety, even if someone else paid the price. You've done it too, in smaller ways. Maybe you lied to avoid trouble. Maybe you blamed someone else because you were under pressure. Maybe you kept quiet when you should have spoken. You told yourself it wasn't the right time. You were too tired, too overwhelmed, too uncertain. And in the moment, that felt true. The part of you that wants to do the right thing was still there, but quiet, buried under the part that needed to get through the hour. Stress doesn't make you bad, but it makes it easier to justify bad behavior. You cut corners. You take shortcuts. You hurt people and say it wasn't personal. You say it was necessary. You tell yourself others would have done the same, and maybe they would, but that doesn't erase the harm. You like to think your morality is stable, fixed, that it holds in any weather, but it doesn't. It's fragile. It needs energy, clarity, safety. When those go, your ethics can slip fast. You feel it when someone takes too long in traffic and you curse. When a coworker misses a deadline and you throw them under the bus. When your partner brings up an issue and you dismiss it because you've had a hard day. You're not a monster, but you acted like one for a moment. And that moment counts. There's a version of you that only shows up under pressure. The version that lies when the truth might cost you. The version that lashes out when you feel exposed. The version that watches someone else suffer and walks away because helping would make your day harder. You don't plan it. It's not a choice you map out. It's a shift, sudden, quiet. Then it's done. You think, "I'd never do that," but you might. You haven't met the full version of yourself yet. You haven't faced the worst days you'll ever have. You haven't lost everything. You haven't been pushed to the edge. But if you ever get there, you'll find out what breaks first. And sometimes, it's your principles. You might think fear is the trigger, but often it's resentment, exhaustion, helplessness. That slow, grinding stress that makes you feel like nothing you do matters. That's when people stop trying. That's when the moral muscle atrophies, not with one big choice, but with hundreds of small ones, each a little less careful than the last. You justify it in steps. First you stop helping, then you stop caring, then you stop noticing. And by the time someone points it out, you're so used to your own defense that you don't recognize the damage. You see this in leadership. A manager once full of values becomes short-tempered and defensive under pressure. They start cutting staff, skipping steps, blaming others. They used to talk about team spirit. Now they talk about numbers. They don't think they've changed, but the people under them feel it every day. You see it in relationships. Someone stops communicating, stops apologizing, starts using past pain as an excuse to avoid effort. They say, "You don't know what I've been through." That might be true, but pain doesn't excuse harm, and stress doesn't erase responsibility. It just makes it harder to carry. The point isn't shame. The point is awareness. If you don't know how stress affects you, you won't see it coming. You'll keep telling yourself you're a good person while doing things that don't match. You'll keep thinking it's everyone else who failed. You'll keep making the same mistake because you never stop to ask, what do I become when things fall apart? If you want to know who someone really is, watch them under pressure. Not just once, but over time. Watch how they act when they're late, when they're broke, when they're sick, when they're grieving. That's when the mask slips. That's when the excuses pile up. That's when the old rules start to loosen. You won't always like what you see, but you can learn from it. You can slow down before reacting. You can build systems that help you stay grounded. You can tell people what you need instead of exploding. You can name your stress instead of hiding behind it. You can admit when your values crack under pressure and then do the work to repair them. Stress doesn't make you a monster, but it reveals the one inside you. The part you ignore, the part you explain away, the part you hope stays quiet. And if you want to live with integrity, you have to face that part, not just when it's easy, but when it's breaking. Someone out there doesn't have a kind word to say about you. They don't think you meant well. They don't think it was a misunderstanding. They think you hurt them, and they might be right. Not fully, not completely, not without context, but right enough. You played a part in a story they now carry as a wound, and in their version, you're the one who did the damage. This isn't easy to hear. You like to think of yourself as fair, as honest, as someone who only lashes out when pushed, but memory doesn't care about your self-image. The way you tell the story in your head is not the only version. There are other perspectives, other details, things you forgot, things you never noticed, pain you caused that you didn't have to witness. Think of someone who cut you off during a hard time. To them, it might have been necessary. Maybe they say you were negative. Maybe they felt drained. Maybe you leaned too hard without seeing it. You remember it as abandonment. They remember it as survival. The truth probably lives between those two versions, but they don't see the same story you do, and they never will. You've done this too. You've said, "I had to walk away," or "they took advantage," or "they made me feel small," and you meant it, but chances are they tell a different story. They say you gave up too soon, that you were cold, that you misunderstood them. You walked away feeling righteous. They walked away feeling betrayed. And neither of you is lying. At some point, you caused harm. You were sharp when you didn't have to be. You ghosted someone instead of being honest. You raised your voice and then acted like it didn't matter. You made a joke that landed wrong. You ignored a message for too long. You showed up late again. You said you'd be there and then weren't. You didn't listen when someone tried to explain how much it hurt. You told yourself you were tired. You were overwhelmed. You didn't know what else to do. You didn't mean it that way. You thought they'd understand. Maybe they should have, but they didn't. And now you live in their mind as someone who failed them. Not by accident, but by choice, or what looked like choice to them. You won't get to explain your way out of it. They've already filled in the gaps. They've replayed the moment a dozen times. They've told friends. They've added meaning where you left silence. And even if you apologized, it may not have landed. Maybe it was too late. Maybe it felt hollow. Maybe they didn't want repair, they wanted distance. That's their right. You don't get to control how someone remembers you. You can mean well and still mess things up. You can have good intentions and still cause real damage. It doesn't cancel out who you are. It doesn't make you evil. But it does mean you have to live with the fact that in someone's life, you weren't the good guy. That person might never bring it up. You might pass each other on the street someday, and they'll look the other way. You might hear your name come up in a story they tell, and you won't like the role you play. You'll feel the urge to defend yourself, to say, That's not how it happened. And maybe it isn't. But your memory is not the only one that counts. This doesn't mean you carry endless guilt. Guilt only helps if it leads to change. What matters more is honesty. Can you sit with the fact that you hurt someone without collapsing? Can you admit that your actions had an impact you didn't intend? Can you look back at those moments, not to explain them away, but to learn from them? That's the difference between shame and responsibility. Shame says, I'm a terrible person. Responsibility says, I caused harm. I want to understand how. One pulls you under, the other pulls you forward. Sometimes the damage wasn't loud, it wasn't betrayal. It wasn't abuse, it was slow. A buildup of small dismissals, half-hearted promises, vague answers, delayed replies, distance when they needed closeness, unreliable care. You didn't notice it in real time, but they did, and it left a mark. There are people you don't speak to anymore. Some of them miss you, some don't. Some feel free without you. Some still replay the way things ended, and some have labeled you in their mind. Selfish, distant, manipulative, uncaring. Those words might sting. You might say, that's not me. But maybe it was for a moment. Maybe it was a version of you that doesn't exist now. That version still did damage. You've also forgiven people who never knew they hurt you. You let things go. You moved on. That's part of life. But someone might not be able to do the same with you. You might live in the back of their mind as a warning, a lesson, a name they don't want to hear again. And if you ever cross paths, they might smile politely and still carry that scar. Not because they're petty, but because pain makes people cautious. If you're lucky, someone will tell you what you did. They'll say, this hurt, and give you a chance to make it right. That's not easy. It takes humility to listen, to not interrupt, to not say, yeah, but you also. It takes work to stay with the discomfort, to own your part without defending your whole character. You may never get that chance. Most people won't confront you. They'll just disappear, or go quiet, or shift the tone. They'll make space in their life where you used to be, and you'll feel it if you're paying attention. You'll be tempted to rewrite history, to say it wasn't that bad, to say they misunderstood. And maybe they did. Maybe the story they tell is unfair. But fairness doesn't erase impact. And being misunderstood doesn't mean you didn't do harm. You don't need to be perfect to be worth loving, but you do need to accept that you're not always the hero. Not in every story. Not for every person. Someone out there remembers you as the one who hurt them, and they're not wrong. ... Freedom sounds good until it's real. People say they want it. Freedom from rules, freedom to choose, freedom to live how they want. But when it arrives, most step back. They hesitate. Because real freedom comes with risk. It strips away the excuses. It makes you the one responsible. And most people don't want that. They want something that feels like freedom, but still comes with rails, with guidelines, with someone to blame if it goes wrong. It starts early. You grow up with instructions. Do this, don't do that. Eat this, wear this. Get good grades, don't talk back. You're told what's safe, what's smart, what's expected. If you follow the rules, things work. You get praise, you stay out of trouble. So you learn to trade freedom for approval. Not because you're weak, because it works. It gives you structure. It gives you a place in the system. That feels good until it doesn't. As you get older, you're told you can choose. Pick a path. Make your life. But the choices aren't real unless you're willing to carry the weight. It's easy to say you want to work for yourself until there's no paycheck unless you go get it. It's easy to say you want to speak your mind until someone pulls away from you because of it. It's easy to say you don't want to live by other people's rules until you realize how hard it is to build your own. So most people don't. They choose structure over risk. They choose the job that drains them over the one that excites them because it's predictable. They stay in relationships that feel safe but dead because being alone is too uncertain. They do what they're told, follow what's popular, repeat what others say, not because they believe it, but because it keeps them comfortable. And comfort feels like peace, but it's not. It's just quiet control. Ask someone what they'd do if they could do anything. They'll hesitate. They might laugh. They might say something vague, travel more, write a book, start a business. But press them and the answers fall apart. Not because they don't have dreams, but because they haven't practiced wanting. They've practiced surviving, fitting in, staying out of trouble. Wanting something real feels risky. It exposes you. Freedom means you pick the goal. You define success. You decide who you are without asking for permission. And that terrifies people. Because if it's all up to you, then the failure is yours too. You can't blame your parents. You can't blame the system. You can't blame your old job, your old partner, your old city. You stood up. You said, I choose this. And maybe it didn't work. That's the price. That's the weight. That's freedom. People prefer chains that feel earned. A steady job, a reliable schedule, a predictable future. Even if those things choke their joy, they stick with them because unpredictability feels like danger. Freedom feels like falling. Even if the cage is open, they stay inside. They tell themselves it's responsible. They tell themselves it's maturity. But deep down, they know it's fear. Even in politics, freedom is unpopular. People vote for safety, for someone who promises order. Not truth, not growth, order. They want someone to fix it, to make it make sense, to take away the confusion. Freedom means hearing things you don't like, living next to people you don't agree with, facing realities that don't flatter you. Most don't want that. They want to be told they're right, that they're safe, that everything will stay the same. Real freedom disrupts. It asks questions. It breaks tradition. It says, why do we do it this way? And that gets labeled as dangerous, or ungrateful, or selfish. Because if you want to be free, you have to be willing to stand apart. And most people don't want to stand apart. They want to belong. So they trade silence for acceptance. They trade truth for peace. They trade themselves for something easier to carry. This shows up in small choices. You feel the urge to leave a party early, but you stay because you don't want to seem rude. You disagree in a meeting, but you stay quiet because you don't want to be the one who slows things down. You say yes when you want to say no. You say you're fine when you're not. You do what's expected instead of what's true, because it's simpler, because it keeps the surface calm. But the cost adds up. You lose clarity. You lose confidence. You forget what you like. You forget what matters to you. And when someone asks what you really want, you pause, not because you're lost, but because you haven't had space to answer honestly in a long time. You've trained yourself to follow, not to lead. Some people break out. They burn down the system. They leave the job, the city, the identity. They say, I won't live like this. But even they find new rules, new chains, new ways to feel safe. Freedom isn't a one-time act. It's a habit, a posture. You have to choose it again and again, especially when it would be easier to let someone else decide for you. And freedom isn't clean. It doesn't promise happiness. It doesn't promise security. It just gives you space to find your own answers. And not everyone wants that space. It's lonely. It's open. It's full of wrong turns. But if you want a life that feels real, not safe, not polished, but real, freedom is the only path. Few take it. Fewer stick with it. Most look at it, pause, then turn back. Because chains are heavy, but they're familiar. And for many, that's enough. You like to believe you matter. That your presence holds weight. That if you left, really left, people would feel it for a long time. You picture the gap you'd leave behind, the silence, the sadness, the way others might pause, reflect, wish they'd said more. And maybe they would, but not for long. Not as long as you think. Because people move on. They always do. Even the ones who loved you most. At work, they'll hold a short meeting. maybe send an email. They'll speak kindly, say you contributed, meant something, helped build what's still here. Someone might cry. Then they'll fill your role, not out of cruelty, but because the work continues. Deadlines stay. Clients still need answers. Systems don't pause for absence. Your desk becomes someone else's. Your logins get reassigned. Your ideas stay in files, but your name fades. People say, no one can replace you. But they can. They will. They'll find someone with similar skills, a different voice, a different way, but someone who gets the job done. That person will adjust your systems, change your templates, improve your process. Over time, they'll stop mentioning you at all. You'll become the person who used to run this, not because they're cold, but because the machine can't run on memory. With friends, it's slower. They'll post something, a photo, a quote. They'll talk about you for a week or two, maybe longer if you were close. They'll cry, they'll share stories, but then life pulls them back in. Their kids need rides, their jobs need attention, their phones keep buzzing. They mean well. They'll say things like, I think about them all the time. And maybe they do, briefly, in flashes, while waiting at a red light, while hearing a song. But then they move on. Even family adjusts. They grieve deeply. They replay memories. They sit in rooms that still smell like you, but time changes the shape of the pain. It dulls. It becomes part of the background. They don't forget you, but they stop expecting you. Your name stops coming up in everyday talk. Holidays feel different for a few years. Then they settle. They create new traditions. They learn how to be a family without you. A partner might grieve the hardest. They'll sleep on one side of the bed for a while. They'll wear your sweatshirt, talk to the air like you're still in it. But eventually, they'll meet someone else. Not because you didn't matter, but because they still want to be held. They want someone to listen, someone to wake up beside. And when that day comes, they'll feel guilty. Then they'll stop, because life wants to continue and love doesn't freeze. You imagine permanence. You think your role in people's lives is carved in stone, but it's not. It's written in sand. And when the tide comes, it doesn't ask who you were. It doesn't pause. It washes over. Slowly at first, then completely. That's not cruelty. That's life. Memory can't carry the weight of absence forever. Even your digital self fades. Someone deletes your old accounts, or leaves them up, frozen in time. Your last messages stay unread. Your name in group chats gets moved below the fold. Notifications stop. You become a quiet profile, a ghost in people's feeds. People mean to revisit, to reread, but they don't. Other posts fill the screen. Other lives keep posting. You think the projects you started will hold your name. They won't. Someone else will finish them, or change direction, or let them die. People will say this started with them, and then talk about what came next. Because momentum matters more than origin. Even legacy gets edited. Your best work might get used without mention. Your ideas might keep living, but not under your name. This might feel harsh, but it's not personal. It's the same for everyone. The world doesn't pause for absence. It rearranges. It adapts. It keeps going. Not because you didn't matter, but because it has to. People can't carry grief forever. It's too heavy. It takes up too much room, so they set it down. They remember you with warmth, but they stop waiting for you to walk through the door. The truth is, everyone's replaceable. Even the greats. Leaders, inventors, artists. Their faces go on shirts, their words on posters. But the world finds new leaders, new voices, new art. No one holds the spotlight forever. Someone always comes next. You might think, but I'm different. My people really love me. And they probably do. But love doesn't stop time. It doesn't stop need. People still get hungry. They still get lonely. They still want to laugh. The ones who stay frozen in grief often get left behind. So even love moves forward. That doesn't erase you, but it does mean you stop being central. You stop being daily. You become a story they tell, not a person they call. You've done this too. You've moved on. From friends who drifted, from mentors who faded, from people who once meant the world. You didn't mean to forget them. You just made space for the living, for the now. You remembered them on birthdays, on anniversaries, then not at all. You still care, but you no longer carry. You want to matter, and you do, but not in the way you hope, not permanently, not deeply, not in a way that pauses life when you're gone. You matter for a while, then you don't. You get remembered, then less, then only sometimes. And one day, not at all. Someone else will take your seat. Someone else will tell the story their way. Your face will fade. Your name will slip. Not because you failed, but because that's how life works. You are loved. And still, you are replaceable. At the start, love feels simple. You laugh. You share. You feel seen. There's energy between you, sharp, warm, electric. You think about each other when you're apart. You talk about the future like it's obvious. You say things like always and forever and mean them. There's closeness, desire, trust. You believe what you've found is rare. You believe it will last. But then time moves. Life sets in. You build routines. You stop asking questions because you think you already know the answers. You stop noticing small changes because they don't shout. You assume the foundation is strong because it once was. But cracks don't start as earthquakes. They start quiet. They widen slowly. They spread underfoot. You begin avoiding things, small things at first. You don't bring up what annoyed you last night. You pretend you didn't notice the tone in their voice. You let the hurt slide because you're tired. You tell yourself it's not worth the argument. You keep the peace. That peace becomes a pattern. That pattern becomes silence. You stop talking about feelings because it's easier not to. You already know how they'll respond. You've had the same argument 5 times and nothing changed. You start managing each other instead of connecting. You tell half-truths. You share facts, not emotions. You smile on cue. You touch out of habit. You tell yourself it's normal. That long-term love means boredom. That all couples fade. That no one stays passionate forever. But what you call love is now fear. Fear of change. Fear of pain. Fear of starting over. You're not staying because you feel alive. You're staying because you're scared of what leaving might do. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want to disappoint your families. You don't want to be alone. So you bury the doubt. You get through the week. You focus on logistics. You avoid eye contact when things feel tense. Maybe you're married. Maybe you've built a life together, shared finances, a mortgage, kids, pets, memories. It's not simple to walk away. There's history, there's pressure, there are consequences. So you stay. You tell yourself you're doing the right thing. You call it commitment. But deep down, you're holding your breath. You're shrinking. You've traded truth for stability. Or maybe it's early, but not new. A few years in, no paperwork, no kids. But you still can't imagine what would happen if you left. You think you'd ruin them. You think you'd regret it. You tell yourself you're lucky to have someone who loves you, even if it doesn't feel good anymore, even if the connection's thin. You think walking away would prove you're broken. So you stay and hope your feelings return. Some couples stay together without ever saying the word fear. They call it loyalty. They say, "We've been through so much." They say, "No one else could handle me." They say, "We've made it this far, might as well keep going." But what they mean is, "I don't know who I'd be without them." And that's not love, that's dependency. Fear is a powerful glue. It keeps you from facing the truth. It tells you that pain is better than uncertainty, that at least this is known, at least this is shared. You convince yourself that your needs are too much, that asking for more is selfish, that maybe you're the problem. You stop expecting love to feel warm. You start measuring success by how little you argue. Some people fear being alone more than they fear being misunderstood. So they stay in relationships where they don't feel seen, where their wants are dismissed, where connection is shallow. They stop dreaming. They stop desiring. They call it maturity. They call it real life. But the truth is, they're scared. Scared to start over. Scared to feel pain. Scared to admit that what once worked doesn't anymore. Others stay because they're afraid of what they'd have to face outside the relationship. Loneliness, regret, grief. They picture empty apartments, friends choosing sides, explanations they'll have to give. They imagine judgment, failure. They imagine losing someone who still says, "I love you," even if they don't show it. They think, how could I leave someone who didn't do anything wrong? But not wrong isn't the same as right. Sometimes both people know. They feel the distance. They see it, but neither one wants to say it first. So they keep up the routine. They perform affection. They sleep beside each other, but feel 1,000 miles apart. They build a life around not naming what's missing, around not feeling too much, around distraction, tasks, schedules. When someone finally says, "I'm not happy," the other often says, "I had no idea." But they did. They just didn't ask, or didn't want to hear the answer, or hoped if they waited long enough, it would pass. But love doesn't return through silence. It doesn't grow through avoidance. If it's gone, pretending won't bring it back. You can't love someone out of fear and call it devotion. You can't stay because you're afraid and expect that fear to turn into joy. Love changes over time, but it's not supposed to vanish. Not if it's still alive. If the feeling is gone, and the connection's dull, and the conversations are flat, something's broken. Naming it isn't betrayal, it's honesty. Fear isn't always dramatic. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It says, "What if you're wrong?" It says, "You'll never find better." It says, "You're lucky anyone loves you." And if you listen, you stay. You settle. You dim yourself. You keep hoping that time will fix what clarity has already revealed. You can't build a future on what used to be true. You can't keep pointing to the past to justify the present. If love has faded into fear, that's not stability. That's stuckness. That's endurance without joy. That's presence without meaning. That's two people playing roles instead of living lives. Some people wake up one day and realize they've spent years in something that no longer fits. They grieve it, they mourn it, but then they walk, not because they stopped caring, but because they finally saw what fear had built around them and decided not to live in it anymore.
You think you make your own choices. You think you like what you like because it fits you. You think you know your reasons. But the truth is, most of what you choose is shaped by what surrounds you. You live in a mirror maze, and every reflection, every face, every feed, every glance nudges you, changes you. You're being watched, and you know it. So you adjust. You walk into a room, and something shifts. The way you sit, the tone of your voice, the words you pick. You don't decide to change. You just do. You scan for cues without knowing. You match energy. You drop ideas that feel out of place. You hold back an opinion that might land wrong. Not because you're fake, but because being accepted feels safer than being honest. Even when you're alone, you're not alone. You scroll, you read, you compare. You carry people's eyes in your head. You post something and picture the reaction before it happens. You draft a caption, then delete it. You say something out loud and hear someone else's voice in your mind, questioning it. You don't just think for yourself. You think for the version of yourself that others expect to see. Social pressure doesn't always look like bullying. It looks like trends, like likes, like silence. You see what gets celebrated, so you aim for it. You see what gets mocked, so you avoid it. You don't wear what you want. You wear what fits the moment. You don't speak how you feel. You speak how others do. And it's not always fear. Sometimes it's subtle. You want to belong. You want to be liked. You want to be understood. So you shape yourself into something smoother, something easier to accept. Companies know this. Platforms are built on it. Algorithms don't just reflect your interests, they guide them. You think you found that new song, that brand, that opinion, but it was placed in your path. It rose because people like you engaged with it. It showed up because the machine knew you'd pause. The more you click, the more it learns. The more it learns, the more it feeds. You think you're browsing freely, but you're walking a path already drawn. Surveillance isn't just cameras and tracking. It's influence, subtle, constant. You notice what others notice. You care about what they care about. Even your morals shift under observation. If everyone around you laughs at a cruel joke, you might laugh too. If the room praises someone you dislike, you might stay quiet. You tell yourself you're neutral, but you're not. You're adjusting. You're watching them watch you. Think about a time you changed your mind. Was it logic or pressure? Did you really shift, or did you just stop speaking up? Think about a time you liked something in secret. A song, a book, a belief. You kept it to yourself because it didn't match the crowd. You told yourself it wasn't important. But the truth is, it was too risky. Not because anyone told you no, but because you saw enough sideways glances to know better. Most of the time, you don't notice this happening. You call it growth, or taste, or awareness. And sometimes it is, but sometimes it's just erosion. You don't believe less, you just speak less. You don't want less, you just reach for it quietly. Because someone is watching, a parent, a partner, a stranger on the internet, and their eyes change how you move. Even in small choices, the eyes matter. You pick certain photos for your profile. You answer questions in ways that sound smart, or kind, or clever. You share your achievements and skip your failures. Not because you're trying to deceive, but because you know how the story plays better with a clean arc. You know what gets applause. But who are you without the applause? Who are you when no one is watching? Most people don't know. They've lived so long being seen that the private self is blurry. The voice in their head sounds like an audience. Even solitude feels performative. They try to relax and wonder if they're doing it right. They try to journal and edit the sentence. They look in the mirror and imagine someone else looking too. You can't turn off the influence. It's everywhere. But you can notice it. You can ask, did I choose this, or did it just feel safe? You can ask, would I still want this if no one else cared? You can test your preferences without someone else's approval in the room. It's not easy, but it's real. People are watching, that's true. But the deeper truth is that you let them shape you more than you realize. You think you're choosing, you're adapting, you think you're being true, you're being careful. The difference matters. Real choice feels shaky. It's not popular. It's not efficient. It doesn't always land well, but it belongs to you. And most people haven't felt that in years. They've forgotten what it's like to choose something unpopular, or ugly, or unknown, just because it speaks to them, just because it feels right. You're being watched, but that doesn't mean you have to perform. You can still speak plainly. You can still dress how you like. You can still hold an opinion that no one claps for. You can be seen and still belong to yourself, but only if you notice how often you don't. They don't flinch. They don't hesitate. They don't lose sleep. That's what makes them dangerous. The people who rise fastest in systems built on profit, control, and appearance are not the kindest or the most competent. They are the ones willing to do what others won't. They lie without guilt. They cut corners without shame. They see people as tools, not as lives. And the system rewards them for it. You think merit wins. You think the person who works hardest, who plays fair, who follows the rules will rise. But power doesn't work like that. It favors clarity, boldness, certainty. And no one looks more certain than someone who feels nothing. Someone who can fire 100 people and still smile at dinner. Someone who can charm in public and exploit in private without the two ever crossing. A ruthless person makes decisions fast. They don't second guess. They don't ruminate. They act. And in business, politics, and status-driven spaces, action beats hesitation. You might sit with a decision for days, wondering about the fallout. They don't. They see a move that benefits them, and they make it. If someone gets hurt, that's not their problem. It's just the cost of winning. This isn't about back alley deals or cartoon villains. It's clean suits and boardrooms. It's slick campaigns. It's confident emails and practiced smiles. It's the executive who takes credit for the team's work. The manager who pits people against each other to keep control. The politician who stokes fear to climb higher. They don't need to be loud. They just need to be unbothered by harm. You might say, but people see through that. Sometimes, but often they don't. Charm covers a lot, especially when it's paired with power. If someone is good-looking, well-spoken, and successful, people want to believe they're also good. That bias lets sociopaths move through systems untouched. They face less scrutiny. When they do harm, it's explained away. They're misunderstood. They're decisive. They're just doing what it takes. Even when they're caught, they bounce back. Because they don't carry shame. They spin the story. They deny. They sue. They fire whoever threatens their image. Kind people get crushed by guilt. Sociopaths weaponize it. If they hurt someone, they make the victim look unstable, overly emotional, bitter. Then they move on, untouched. You've probably worked for someone like this. They made you feel small, kept you guessing, praised you one day, iced you out the next. You stayed because you wanted their approval. You tried harder, gave more, but nothing you did made it safe. That wasn't by accident. It was control. It kept you off balance. That gave them power. They rise because they understand systems. They know where the weak points are. They know how to build loyalty, not through trust, but through fear, confusion, and control. They're not smarter. They're just more willing to treat people like numbers. And in systems that prioritize outcomes over ethics, that's enough. Kind people lose time to thought. They pause. They weigh options. They ask how others will feel. They want to do good, not just look good. That slows them down. That makes them easy to overlook. You rarely see someone who's soft-spoken, generous, and open-hearted, running the whole show. Not because they can't lead, but because the path up is lined with choices that violate who they are. To climb, you often have to step over people. To maintain power, you have to protect your image. That means cutting off threats, avoiding blame, taking credit, staying distant. If you're kind, those choices hurt. You carry them. You question them. A sociopath doesn't. They feel nothing and keep going. It's not always obvious. They don't walk around bragging. They present well. They know how to mirror emotions. They learn what people want to hear. They give the right speech. They know when to nod, when to laugh, when to look concerned. But it's all for effect. None of it costs them anything. Power makes this worse. The higher someone climbs, the more protected they become. The fewer people who challenge them, the more people who depend on their favor. And when someone has no conscience, that kind of leverage is dangerous. They can ruin careers with a sentence. They can silence critics. They can shape entire narratives, and they will, without blinking. You see this in politics. The leaders who rise are not always the ones who care the most. They're often the ones who feel the least, who can use tragedy to boost approval, who can fake empathy while cutting support, who can say one thing on camera and another behind closed doors. If they lose, they don't reflect. They retaliate. If they win, they rewrite the story. You see it in entertainment. Some of the most celebrated names have left trails of abuse. But they keep getting work, keep getting applause, because they sell. Because people like the product more than they care about the damage behind it. Charm buys silence. Fame protects cruelty. And sociopaths know how to use both. Not all powerful people are sociopaths, but the ones who are have an edge, because they can go places others can't. They're not held back by guilt, or doubt, or empathy. That lets them take more, risk more, say more. And in systems that reward outcomes, that looks like leadership. You don't have to be cruel to succeed. But if you are, you'll face fewer internal obstacles. You won't lose sleep. You won't pause. You won't carry regret. And in a culture that praises confidence over conscience, that's often enough to win. The people who value kindness, fairness, and care often burn out first. Not because they're weak, but because the system punishes their values. They bend, adjust, try to survive, but over time it wears them down. They see people win by lying, stealing, using others, and wonder why they're still trying to do it right. Because doing it right costs more. You lose deals, you lose time, you lose momentum, and someone else, less honest, less burdened, slides into the spot you wanted. That's the truth most don't want to say. In many places, the ruthless rise. Not because they're the best, but because they're the most willing to do what the rest of us wouldn't.
You will die. One day, maybe quietly, maybe not, your body will stop. Your name will echo for a while in a few places. Your home, your phone, your inbox. Then it will fade. Photos will stay on hard drives. Some people will remember your laugh, or your advice, or the way you made them feel. But the world won't change because you're gone. It will keep spinning, fast and careless. Traffic will crawl through lights. Birds will circle the same trees. The weather won't pause. This bothers people. You want to believe you matter more than that. You want the sky to dim a little. You want the air to feel different, but it won't. The universe doesn't notice. It didn't notice when you were born. It won't notice when you stop breathing. Stars won't flicker. Planets won't shift. Tides won't miss a beat. Because the universe isn't watching. You aren't special in its eyes. Not because you failed, but because it has no eyes. No heart, no judgment, no story. Just force. Gravity, heat, pressure. The rules of physics apply to you the same way they apply to dust and gas and stone. You came from matter. You will return to it. That process is not personal. It's not sacred. It's just what happens. People try to make meaning from it. They say there's a reason, a plan, a lesson, something more. But they're not speaking for the universe. They're speaking for themselves. They want comfort. They want to believe that suffering serves a purpose, that joy has a reward, that their life fits into something larger. But the universe doesn't offer that. It offers space, it offers time, and it keeps going. Look at history, millions of lives, names forgotten, stories untold. People who loved, lost, tried, gave up. None of it changed the stars. Civilizations rose, collapsed, disappeared into dust. The earth didn't notice. Volcanoes erupted, ice melted, forests returned. What mattered to people in those moments, wars, crowns, prayers, vanished. The rocks stayed. The ocean stayed. Time kept moving, even now. If you zoom out far enough, none of this is visible. Your city is a dot. Your life is a flicker. The nearest galaxy doesn't know you're here. Light from your existence won't reach it before you die. Nothing in the wider universe cares about your plans, your guilt, your hopes. That's not cruelty. That's just how it is. This can feel bleak. You might ask, then what's the point? But that question assumes the point has to come from outside, that something bigger must assign it, that you need permission to matter. You don't. Meaning isn't given, it's made. Not once, but over and over. It's found in what you build, who you help, how you love. Not because the universe applauds, but because you decided to care anyway. You might hope that something watches, that someone hears you, that when you cry out in the dark answers. But it doesn't. The dark stays silent. That silence isn't an insult. It's just what silence is. If you want something to hear you, it has to be another human, or a dog, or a tree, maybe, but not the universe. The universe has no ears. You can spend your life trying to beat that, trying to leave a mark big enough that it breaks through. But even the biggest marks fade. The statues crumble. The books go unread. The names get mispronounced or misremembered. Even the sun will die. Even the galaxies will stretch until their light can't be seen. Nothing lasts. That includes you. And yet people get up every morning. They work, they love, they fight, they rest. Not because they believe the universe will reward them, but because they've decided to live anyway. They raise children, start businesses, paint walls, hold hands. Not for legacy, not for cosmic recognition, just because they can. If you stop waiting for the universe to care, you can start doing what actually matters. You can stop trying to impress something that doesn't watch. You can stop thinking that pain must serve a larger goal. Sometimes pain just happens, and healing does too. Not because of fate, but because your body and your mind are built to try. Imagine a small fire in a dark forest. That's your life. It won't warm the world. It won't change the stars. But it's real. It burns. It gives heat and light while it lasts. And someone else might see it, might feel it, might come closer because of it. That's enough. The flame doesn't need a purpose beyond burning. You might not leave a legacy. Your name might not last. But you were here. You felt things. You made choices. You shaped other people's lives in small ways. Sometimes good, sometimes not. You weren't the center of the world, but you were part of it. Not because the universe needed you, but because you were born. That's all. So when you look up at the sky and feel small, that's honest. You are small. So is everyone. So is every nation, every belief, every empire. But small doesn't mean meaningless. It just means you're not the main character in a cosmic drama. You're a spark, a moment, a voice in the wind, temporary, unrecorded, and real. You'll die, and nothing will blink. The clouds will keep drifting. The stars will keep burning. The news will roll on. People will laugh, argue, make dinner, forget. Your absence won't change the math of the universe. It won't unspin the galaxies. But it will mean something to the people who knew you. For a while, maybe longer. Eventually, your name will be said for the last time. Your image will fade. Your stories will stop being told. That's not failure. That's just time. You don't have to fight it. You don't have to make the universe notice you. You just have to live your life like it's yours. Not borrowed, not owed, not judged. Just yours. Then give it back when it's over. Quietly, completely, as everything else has.
They'll say they won't forget. They'll swear they'll remember everything. Your voice, your laugh, your quirks, your phrases. And for a while, they do. They carry your tone in their head. They mimic your sayings. They replay voicemails just to hear you again. They cry when they hear a song you loved or read something in your handwriting. But memory fades. Even the ones who loved you most will forget the shape of your voice. It happens slowly. First, they stop being sure about details. Was your laugh high or low? Did you say "I love you" often or just when it mattered? Did you hum when you cooked or was that someone else? The mind tries to hold on, but time sands down the edges. Eventually, your voice blends with others. The lines blur. It becomes a feeling more than a sound. And even that doesn't last. Your face fades too. Not at first. They'll have photos, videos maybe. But those don't change with time. You did. You had moods, expressions, moments that didn't get recorded. You had a way of turning your head when you listened, a way of blinking when you were about to say something hard. Those things don't live in pictures. They live in presence. And when presence ends, so do the details. They'll tell stories. At dinners, on anniversaries, in casual conversation, you'll come up like a familiar reference. But over time, the stories flatten. They lose their weight. People nod, smile, then move on. The stories stop being about you and start being about them, what you meant to them, how they felt around you. The you that existed gets replaced by the you they remember, and those are not the same. Even your name changes. At first, it's said often, sometimes with tears. Then it becomes a quiet reference. Then it becomes rare. Someone says, "They would have loved this," or "They used to say," but the frequency drops. Years pass. People leave jobs, move houses, delete old messages. New relationships form. New memories take up space. There's only so much the mind can carry. If you left behind kids, they'll remember more, longer. But even they won't remember everything. They'll remember how you made them feel, mostly. Safety or pressure, warmth or distance. They'll forget specific words. They'll forget the sound of your feet in the hallway. They'll forget your phone number, your passwords, your favorite food, unless it was also theirs. They'll keep some objects. Maybe, but those will become symbols, not memories. And if you didn't have kids or family close by, the process moves faster. Friends keep you for a few seasons. Coworkers replace you quickly. Neighbors stop mentioning you. The circle shrinks. Even online, where everything feels permanent, your posts stop getting read. Your photos get buried. One day, someone will delete your old profile, or the platform itself will vanish. Nothing digital is truly forever. Think about the people you've lost. Try to hear their voices right now. You can get close, maybe. You can hear the rhythm, but not the pitch, not the pauses, not the sighs between thoughts. You know you loved them. You know they mattered, but you can't fully bring them back in your mind. You carry a version of them, a sketch, not the real thing. This is what happens to everyone, even the famous, even the ones who wrote books or made films or led movements. Their work might last. Their impact might ripple, but the person, their voice, their fears, their timing in a joke, fades. We remember the highlight reel, not the human. We archive the product, not the presence. People try to fight this. They record everything. Voice notes, home videos, social media clips. They think they're saving themselves from forgetting. But those files don't get played as often as you think. And when they do, it feels distant. You hear the voice, but it doesn't land the same. It feels like watching someone else, because it is. A recording is not a person. It's a frame, not a body. A line, not a voice. And even if someone does remember your voice longer than most, eventually they'll be gone too. The last person who knew you will disappear. Then there's no one left who can say, "I remember how they spoke." You stop existing in memory. You become a name on paper, if that. Then, even that gets forgotten. You were here. You mattered. That doesn't stop the forgetting. It doesn't make your voice echo longer. Sound fades. Memory decays. Attention shifts. Life moves forward. It has to. People can't keep the past alive forever, not because they don't care, but because they're still living. They have jobs to do, families to raise, bodies to maintain. They forget you by accident. You'll be forgotten. Not out of cruelty, not even out of time, just because that's how minds work. That's how life works. The brain protects itself by letting go. It files away old things to make room for new. Even grief doesn't last in full form. It softens, then dulls, then becomes quiet. You might leave behind some words, some pictures, a recorded message, but those are artifacts. People may find them useful, or touching, or curious, but they won't bring you back. They won't give someone your voice, not in the way it actually was, rushed when excited, low when serious, shaking when you were afraid. No file captures that. No story keeps that alive. Someone will try to describe it, maybe. They had a warm voice, they'll say, or you'd know it if you heard it. But no one will hear it again. Not exactly, not completely. You'll be gone. And then, quietly, so will the sound of you.
You won't feel it. One moment you're here, breathing, blinking, thinking. The next, you're not. There won't be a final thought you can carry. No awareness of the moment you crossed over. No last-minute insight that ties everything together. The end will come quietly or quickly, or maybe not in the way you pictured. But it will come, and when it does, you won't know. People imagine death like sleep, but sleep has edges. You drift off, then wake up. There's a before and after. You dream, toss, turn. Death isn't like that. There's no waking, no coming back, no memory of what came before. You fall into something that has no walls, no floor, no shape. You don't float above your body. You don't watch your funeral. You don't hear the sobs in the next room. You just stop. You won't miss anyone. You won't feel relief. You won't be at peace. You won't be anything. The brain, once it shuts down, doesn't hold on. It doesn't light up from the outside. Your identity, the you that watched, worried, wondered, depends on a working body. Take that away, and what's left isn't silence. It's absence. True, full absence. You're not sleeping. You're not resting. You're erased. Other people will feel it. They'll cry, they'll shout, they'll hold each other. But you won't hear it. You won't feel the loss. You won't watch them suffer. Their pain belongs to the living. You're not there to carry it, not even a little. If they say your name, if they speak to the air, if they pray or beg or bargain, it doesn't reach you. It can't, because you're not anywhere anymore. Even if you die in pain, the pain ends with you. The brain stops sending signals. The heart stops pumping. The nerves stop firing. The fear drops off a cliff. Nothing follows it. There's no long tunnel, no light, no voice calling you through. Those are stories the living tell to soften the truth. And the truth is, once you're gone, you don't know you ever were. It's easy to talk about legacy, about how people might remember you, about what mark you'll leave. But that's not for you. That's for them. You won't be proud of what you built. You won't feel regret over what you left undone. You won't look down from anywhere. There won't be a version of you watching from a distance. What's gone is not waiting. It's not watching. It's not even gone. It's just no longer a thing. Imagine a candle. When it's lit, the flame moves. It flickers, glows, warms the room. Then, someone pinches the wick, and the flame goes out. Not slowly, instantly. That's you. The body might take a few more seconds to finish shutting down, but your awareness, yourself, your mind, that goes quickly. And there's no slow fade, no echo, no version of you floating outside the moment. The people you've lost didn't become something else. They just stopped. The ones who died without warning, the ones who saw it coming, they didn't carry their stories into another room. They didn't take their favorite memory with them. They didn't get to turn around for one last look. They just stopped. And now, in the place where they were, there's only memory, and memory belongs to someone else. You can try to believe otherwise. You can picture something eternal. But eternity is a human idea, a projection, something to help us feel bigger than we are, something to make the fear less sharp. But there's no reason to think we get more than this, and there's no evidence to show we do. The brain breaks, the body ends, the lights go out, and the dark doesn't care. Death doesn't feel long. It doesn't feel like anything, but it lasts forever. Not in the way people hope, not in a golden afterlife, halo-wearing kind of way. Just in the sense that it doesn't reverse. It doesn't pause. It doesn't bend to our wishes. Once you're gone, that's it. The world keeps going. But you don't. You don't even know the world is still there. That's what most people can't accept. Not the pain,
not the loss, the nothing. That's what haunts. The thought that you won't even notice the end, that everything you are, every memory, every inside joke, every tiny bit of personality, was only ever temporary. The people who say you'll live on through others are only half right. A version of you might echo, for a while, but the actual you, the one behind your eyes, doesn't stay for the replay. Death doesn't offer a summary. There's no highlight reel, no moment where it all makes sense. The story just cuts, mid-sentence, mid-thought, maybe mid-conversation, and no one gets to feel ready. Not really. Even the people who say they are don't understand what they're saying, because you can't prepare for being nothing. You can only imagine it, and even that fails, because your mind isn't built to picture its own absence. You can spend years trying to live well, trying to avoid harm, trying to build something lasting, but when it ends the same for everyone. The kind, the cruel, the curious, the confused, they all go, and none of them get to see what comes next, because there is no next. There's only the people left behind, standing in the quiet, still talking like you can hear them. You won't know they stayed. You won't know they cried. You won't know anything. Because knowing takes a mind, and you won't have one. You'll be where everyone eventually ends up. Nowhere. Not buried, not floating, not transformed. Just gone. Without fear, without comfort, without memory, forever. Most days feel the same. You wake up, check your phone, get through your routine. You eat the same food. You talk to the same people. You go to work or school or somewhere else you're expected. You do what you have to. Then you come home, sit down, and let a screen carry you through the rest of the night. There are moments of pressure, moments of panic, but mostly it's flat. Not painful, not joyful, just there. You don't feel much. You notice things, traffic, prices, noise, but they don't touch you deeply. You move through the hours without much thought. You forget most of what you did by the time the week ends. You try to stay busy. You check your calendar. You scroll. You answer emails. You talk about shows, errands, news. But all of it runs together. You're not present. You're surviving. People ask, "How are you?" And you say, "Good, we're busy." You don't mean it. You don't even think about it. You say what keeps the moment moving. You don't stop to look at what's really going on. You've learned to stay on the surface. You've learned not to ask questions that don't have clean answers. You live between two poles, distraction and dread. Distraction fills your time. You binge content, switch apps, skim articles, shop without needing anything. You fill every gap. You keep your mind noisy, so you don't have to hear what's underneath. When silence comes, even for a few minutes, you feel it, the weight, the unease, the thing you've been avoiding. That thing is dread, not sharp fear, not crisis, just the slow, steady pull of knowing that something's off. You dread the inbox, the calendar reminder, the meeting, the call, the next bill. You dread your own reflection. You dread the emptiness between tasks. You dread the years stacking up with nothing clear to show for them. You can't name the feeling exactly, but it's there. It sits behind everything. You try to push it down. You keep doing. You keep nodding. You keep pretending. Because stopping would force you to face it. You'd have to ask what you're working toward. Why your days feel hollow. Why the things you used to love don't land the same. So instead, you stay busy. You numb yourself with routine. You let distraction carry you. Even the things that should feel alive start to feel dull. Food, music, sex, travel. You try them. They give you a brief hit, then nothing. You post about them. You talk about them. But inside, it feels like watching someone else live. You're present, but not really. Your mind is already on what's next. It's not depression exactly. You still laugh. You still show up. You still function. But something vital is missing. You feel like a shadow, like a person on autopilot. You remember what joy used to feel like, but you don't feel it now. Not the way you did when you were younger, or when you believed things could still change. You blame stress.
You blame your job, your schedule, your age, the world. And maybe those things play a role. But the truth is, you've adapted to numbness. You've learned to live around it. You don't chase meaning anymore. You chase relief. A clean inbox, a clear calendar, a moment when no one needs anything from you. That's become the goal. You try to stay connected. You text, you like posts, you reply with emojis. You say, let's catch up. But most of the time, you don't. You don't have the energy. You don't want to explain. You don't want to go through the effort of pretending you're okay or admitting that you're not. So you stay quiet. You scroll past. You keep it moving. Even your dreams shrink. You used to picture big things, love, adventure, a life that felt full. Now you just want to make it through the week, to not feel behind, to not disappoint anyone. You lower your expectations until they're manageable. You stop asking what you want. You focus on what you can tolerate. Some days you feel the numbness more. Something small hits you harder than it should. A stranger's voice, a song, an old message. You get that brief flash of grief, or longing, or hunger. It reminds you that you still want something real, but you don't know where to find it anymore. You don't even know what it is, so you return to the cycle. You distract. You check the news. You check the weather. You check the same 3 apps in a loop. You fill the hours. You hit your deadlines. You tell yourself you're doing fine. You tell yourself this is just how life is. You wait for something to shift, but you don't move. Sometimes you talk about being tired, not just sleepy, tired deep in your bones, tired in your head, tired in your spirit. Other people nod. They get it. They feel it too. You joke about burnout. You post memes. You make plans for self-care, but you don't follow through. It feels easier to stay numb. The days blend. The months pass. You hit milestones. You celebrate them the way you're supposed to, but the spark's not there. You smile for the photo. You say the right things, but inside, you feel far away. You feel like a witness, not a participant. You wonder if you've always felt this way, or if it just happened slowly, without warning. You still hope. Some part of you does. Otherwise, you wouldn't feel the absence so clearly. The numbness wouldn't hurt. But hope isn't loud anymore. It's quiet, fragile, not something you say out loud, just something that flickers now and then, when you see a sunset, or hear a piece of music, or remember who you used to be. Then it fades, and the numbness returns. The hours keep moving, and so do you. You don't feel the clock. Not really. You wake up, do what you've done 100 times, and go to bed. You plan things for next month, next year, sometime. You move through each day like you've got an endless supply. But you don't. You're running out of time. Everyone is, and most people are pretending they aren't. You tell yourself there's still time to change, to quit the job you hate, to end the relationship that's gone cold, to forgive someone or say what you've never said. You tell yourself you'll get to it when things settle down, when you feel more ready, when life gives you a sign. But life doesn't pause. There's no ideal moment coming. There's only now, and you're letting it slip. You delay decisions. You scroll instead of starting. You wait for clarity that never arrives. You fill your time with distraction, chores, errands, content, noise. You stay busy so you don't have to feel the pressure, so you don't have to look directly at the gap between where you are and where you thought you'd be. But the delay has a cost. You're not just stalling. You're spending what little time you have left. It's not dramatic at first. Just another week where nothing changes. Another year where the goals stay untouched. Another birthday that passes with a shrug. You think you've got more time. You think the window is still open, but it isn't. Some things don't wait. Some chances don't return. You lose more than you realize when you tell yourself, not yet. Your body feels fine now, but that won't last. The habits you ignore, poor sleep, constant stress, inactivity, are building up. The health you take for granted will shift. Slowly, Then suddenly, joints will ache, energy will drop. You'll notice that recovery takes longer. You'll look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back. You'll wish you'd acted sooner, but you won't get that time back. You assume the people in your life will always be there, but they're running out of time too. Your parents, your friends, the people who shaped you. They won't always be a phone call away. You think you'll visit next month, that you'll finally have the conversation you've been putting off. But something else always gets in the way. And one day, the chance is gone. Not because you chose it, because time made the choice for you. You've got projects you dream about, work you'd love to do, a version of yourself you still believe you could become. But dreaming isn't progress. Vision doesn't replace action. You don't become who you want to be by hoping. You get there by doing, and doing takes time. Time you keep trading for comfort, for safety, for whatever's easiest in the moment. You think you'll start when the fear goes away, but the fear stays, and the time shrinks. You measure your life in calendars and clocks, but it slips through anyway. A decade feels like forever until it's behind you. 5 years ago feels like last week. The things you thought you'd have done by now, many of them haven't even started. The version of yourself you imagined by this age isn't here. And if you keep moving the goalposts, you'll never meet them. You'll run out of runway with nothing real built. Some people realize this too late. They reach the end and look back at years spent surviving, pleasing, pretending. They remember the moments they ignored, the things they almost said, the chances they almost took, the work they never finished, the relationships they didn't fix. They regret not that they failed, but that they didn't try when they had the chance. You don't have to be reckless, but you do have to be honest. If something isn't working, fix it. If someone matters, tell them. If you're lying to yourself, stop. Because every hour you spend stuck is one you never get back. Every day you coast is another step closer to a life you didn't mean to live. The lie most people tell themselves is that time is still on their side, that they're waiting for the right moment. But the right moment is rare. The real ones are inconvenient. They ask you to act while you're still unsure, while you're still afraid. And the longer you wait, the less you become. Not because you're not capable, but because you never gave yourself a chance. You won't be young forever. You won't be sharp forever. You won't be here forever. And it's not just the big things that fade. It's the small ones. The feeling of your feet on the floor in the morning. The way someone looks at you. The quiet space where you feel most like yourself. Those things slip away too. Slowly, then all at once. People say you've got time. Maybe you do, but not as much as you think. The window is closing. The hourglass is running. Not tomorrow, now, right now. And every moment you ignore that is a moment you won't get again. Not in 10 years, not ever. You're running out of time. And you know it. Somewhere deep down, you can feel it. That pressure, that tug, that quiet panic that hits when you stop distracting yourself. You feel it at night. You feel it when something reminds you of how fast things change. You feel it when you see someone older and realize they once stood where you stand now. You can ignore it. You can keep pretending. You can waste another week, another month, another year. But time doesn't wait. It doesn't care. It won't give you more because you ask nicely. It won't pause just because you're not ready. It knows. And one day, you'll realize it's gone. That you are out of time. That the life you wanted never happened. Not because it couldn't, but because you never started.
Death doesn't wait for you to finish. It doesn't wait for a clean goodbye or a neat final thought. It doesn't pause so you can clear the air or explain yourself or say what should have been said years ago. You don't get a last moment that ties it all together. You just stop. Sometimes in the middle of a sentence. Sometimes in the middle of a fight. Sometimes with your mind slipping, or your body broken, or your mouth open, unable to say anything at all. People like to picture peaceful deaths. They imagine bedsides, quiet music, kind words, hands held. That happens sometimes, but more often, death is messy. It comes at the wrong time. It comes in confusion, in pain, in panic. People die alone in hospitals, hooked to machines, unable to speak. They die in cars, in bathrooms, in hallways. They die in chaos. Not everyone gets a slow fade. Some people get ripped out of the world, fast and brutal, without a warning. The body doesn't shut down with grace. It fights, it sputters, it leaks. Muscles contract, faces twist. There's gasping, there's silence, then maybe noise again. The skin changes color, the warmth drains. The line between alive and not alive isn't sharp. It takes time. It's physical, real, uncomfortable. It doesn't look poetic. It looks like failure. Systems crashing, power going out in pieces. The people around you won't always get to prepare. They might not be there. They might hear later, through a call, a knock, a message. There may not be a last moment, just a fact. They're gone. And then everything scrambles. Arrangements, papers, questions, shock. A house full of things that don't know the person is gone. Clothes still folded. Dishes in the sink. Alarms still set. You think you'll get a final word. You won't. You think you'll get to tell them you love them, that you forgive them, that you're sorry. Maybe you will, but maybe you'll argue the day before. Maybe you won't answer the phone. Maybe they'll die while you're out buying groceries. Death doesn't time itself for clarity. It interrupts. It arrives in the middle of the story. You might picture being remembered clearly, but people won't know how you really felt in the end. If you suffered, if you were scared, if you were aware, if you had regrets. They'll guess. They'll tell themselves stories. But no one really knows what's going on inside someone else's final hour. Even if you speak, even if you write something down, it won't cover it all. It won't settle the mess. Sometimes people leave behind a pile of confusion. Passwords, loans, unfinished work, estranged relatives, quiet secrets, nothing tied up, no farewell letter, just absence. And everyone left behind has to figure it out. They have to sort through drawers and inboxes and voicemail messages. They argue, they cry, they make mistakes. Grief isn't clean. It's full of questions and guilt and tension. Some people never get a funeral. Some don't get buried where they hoped. Some don't get the kind of goodbye they wanted. Plans fall through. Money runs out. Families fight. People say the wrong things, or they say nothing at all. Death doesn't stop life from being complicated. It just cuts it short, and everyone else has to deal with the loose ends. Even the people who planned for it, who had wills, who left instructions, who talked openly, can't avoid the mess, because death leaves holes, and people don't know how to fill them. They argue over meaning, over what the person would have wanted, over what mattered most. And underneath it all, there's that deep, heavy ache, the reality that this person is not coming back. If you die young, people say it's unfair. If you die old, they say it was time. But either way, the loss never feels balanced. Some people are left with rage, some with relief, some with both. Sometimes the person who dies wasn't kind, or wasn't present, or caused harm. Death doesn't rewrite the past. It doesn't clean up who you were. It just locks it in. You may want closure. You may think you'll get to watch it all settle from some distant, peaceful place. But you won't. You won't get to see how people react. You won't hear the speeches. You won't know what they say about you in quiet rooms. You won't get to clear your name, or defend yourself, or explain. You won't get to correct the record. You're done. And the story continues without your input. Even when people try to honor you, they get it wrong. They mix up facts. They project their own guilt. They soften the edges. Or they make you sound better than you were. Or worse, they rewrite you for comfort, for meaning, because that's what people do. They try to make the mess feel like a plan. They try to make your ending make sense, even when it doesn't. You can prepare all you want. You can choose the music, the casket, the quote on the card, but you can't control who shows up. You can't control who cries, who stays silent, who keeps your memory close, or who moves on fast. You can't script grief. You can't choreograph death. It doesn't follow instructions. It arrives, it empties the room.
And it leaves behind whatever was there, good, bad, unresolved. And you won't get to see it. You won't get to know how long they remember you. You won't know what they kept or what they threw away. You won't feel the way they touch your old shirt or scroll through your photos. You won't know what breaks them. You won't know what heals them. You won't know when they stop saying your name. You won't get closure. You won't get applause. You won't get to watch the credits roll. You'll just stop. Whatever you were in the middle of, thinking, saying, planning, that's where it ends. No explanation, no answer, no clean line, just the mess you leave behind, and everything you never finished. You think you'll say it when the time is right. You tell yourself you'll reach out tomorrow or next week. You plan to call your father back, to tell your sister you forgive her, to let your friend know you were wrong. You keep the thought in your pocket like a note you'll read later. But time moves, and so do people. One day, the moment's gone, and the words stay inside you. Regret builds in silence, not because you made one huge mistake, but because you didn't say the thing that mattered when you had the chance. The apology you didn't give, the truth you avoided, the love you felt but kept quiet. You think silence keeps things clean. You think it protects you. But silence holds weight, and that weight doesn't go away. You remember the exact moment you should have spoken. You see their face, their pause, the window that opened, and you let it pass. Maybe out of fear, maybe pride, maybe because you thought you had more time. But windows don't stay open. People move on. People shut down. They get tired of waiting. Sometimes they die. And then the door you needed is gone for good. You won't regret everything. Not every choice will haunt you. Some will just fade. But the unsaid things, the things that could have made someone feel seen or loved or forgiven, those stay. They don't fade. They echo. They show up at odd times, at night, in dreams, in conversations that go nowhere because the one you need to have already passed you by. You think regret looks like guilt, but it often feels like absence, like a hollow space where something meaningful could have been. You try to justify it. It wasn't the right time. They wouldn't have understood. It wouldn't have changed anything. Maybe that's true. Maybe it wouldn't have fixed everything, but you would have spoken your truth. And sometimes that's all that matters. The longer you wait, the harder it gets. You build walls around the words. You rehearse them, then silence them. You get used to not saying it. You let the relationship drift. You avoid eye contact. You keep it light. You say, "Take care," instead of "I miss you." You say, "No worries," instead of "That hurt." You say, "Let's catch up," instead of "I'm still here." And each time you do, the gap widens. People aren't mind readers. You assume they know how you feel, that they understand, that your silence speaks for itself. It doesn't. People hear what you say, not what you think. They believe what you show, not what you feel. If you don't tell them, they don't know. And if you wait too long, you lose the right to expect they'll listen when you finally try. Sometimes regret isn't about what you said or didn't say, but about how long you waited to say it. You meant to be kind sooner, to be honest faster, to show up when it mattered, but you didn't. And now you wonder what would have changed if you had. You carry that version of yourself in your head, the one who acted sooner, and you compare it to the one who stayed quiet. You may think the worst regret is saying the wrong thing, but that's easier to live with than saying nothing at all. When you say the wrong thing, at least you tried. You were present. You were brave. You can learn. You can grow. When you say nothing, you're left with a blank space. And you can't fix silence. You can only carry it. Think about the people who aren't here anymore. What would you say if they walked in right now? What would you ask? What would you admit? You probably know, because the words are still sitting in you, untouched. You thought you'd have time. You thought the future would wait, but it didn't. And now you have to speak them to the air, or to yourself, or to no one at all. People leave, sometimes slowly, sometimes without warning. You won't always get a heads up. You won't always get a final talk.
You won't always know it was your last chance to be honest. So if something's on your chest, say it. If you owe someone an apology, give it. If you love someone, don't assume they know. Tell them. Not because it guarantees anything, just because it's true. Regret doesn't shout. It lingers. It whispers when you're alone. It shows up in quiet moments, in still rooms, in unfinished thoughts. It doesn't ruin you, but it shapes you. It makes you careful, sometimes too careful. It teaches you not to wait, but only after it's too late. You can try to outrun it. You can build a life so full that you don't feel the weight, but it catches up. It always does. It waits in birthdays missed, in texts unsent, in relationships that never healed. It waits in the chair across from you, empty. It waits in old letters, in photos, in memories that feel sharp instead of warm. The people you miss, what's loudest isn't the fights the flaws. It's the words you didn't say. The small, simple ones. I'm proud of you. I was wrong. You meant more to me than I ever said. Those are the words that follow you, not because they were complex, but because they were true. And because you waited. Everyone carries regret. That's not failure. It's part of living. But you get to decide how much of it you carry. You can lighten the load. You can speak now. You can write the letter. Make the call. Say the thing you've been rehearsing in your head for years. You can choose not to add to the list. There will always be things you wish you'd done differently. But some of them are still within reach. The words are still yours. The moment hasn't passed yet. And once it does, it won't return. You'll be left with silence, with the echo, with the weight of what never made it into the world. And you'll know it was yours to give.
You want life to mean something. Most people do. It feels wrong to wake up, go through the same motions, and think it's all just random. You want purpose. You want a sign. You want to believe that everything fits together, that the hard parts teach you something, that the good parts lead somewhere. But meaning isn't waiting for you. It's not hidden in a mountain or written in the stars. Meaning doesn't exist on its own. It's not real unless you choose it. The world doesn't care what you do. You can help people or hurt them or disappear completely, and the universe won't blink. Nature runs on cycles. Biology doesn't ask why. Evolution doesn't reward meaning. It rewards survival. That's it. You were born into a system that didn't ask for you. You're part of it, but not central to it. The trees don't care if you're fulfilled. The sky doesn't care if you feel seen. That's the truth you start with. People don't like that. So they build stories about fate, about calling, about destiny. They say, everything happens for a reason, or you were meant to find this. It helps them feel safe. It helps them make sense of pain. But those phrases aren't explanations. They're shields. Most things happen because of chance, habit, or someone else's decision. Sometimes good things come from bad ones. Sometimes they don't. Meaning comes after. It's what you add to the moment. You find meaning where you want to. Some people find it in work. Others find it in children, in service, in art, in faith, in recovery. But none of those things carry meaning by default. A job is a job until you decide it matters. A child is a responsibility until you choose to love them. A belief is just a sentence until you decide it's true. Meaning isn't in the object, it's in the choice. This is both freeing and terrifying. No one hands you a rulebook. No one tells you what matters. You have to build it yourself. And some people don't. They drift. They copy others. They live a borrowed story, hoping it will feel real. But it doesn't. You can follow every rule, hit every milestone, check every box, and still feel empty. Because none of those things mean anything unless you say they do. You see this when people lose something they built their life around. They retire, they get divorced, they lose their faith. The thing that used to give them structure disappears, and they don't know who they are. They feel lost, not because their life changed, but because the meaning they tied to it vanished. That's how fragile it is. When you hang your whole self on one thing, and that thing breaks, everything goes with it. You also see it in people who survive major loss. They go through tragedy, death, illness, failure, and they come out with a new story, a new way to frame it. Not because the pain disappeared, but because they gave it a shape. They said, "This changed me," or "This taught me something," or "This will be the end." That's meaning too. It didn't come from the event. It came from how they chose to live with it. Some people say meaning has to come from something bigger than you, that it has to be eternal, divine. But even that is a choice. Religion gives people structure, but it still requires belief. It still requires that you decide to trust it. Otherwise, it's just words. And not everyone wants or needs that framework. Some find meaning in small things, in planting a garden, in showing up, in being kind, even when no one notices. If you wait for life to show you what matters, you'll wait forever. No moment will tap you on the shoulder and say, "This is the point." You have to look around, take something ordinary, and decide it counts. You have to say, "This is worth my time," even if no one else agrees. That's the only way to beat the emptiness. Meaning is work. It's built, not found. You have to protect it. You have to feed it. You have to check it for cracks. Because it slips, it weakens. The things that meant the world to you at 20 might mean nothing at 40. That doesn't mean you failed. It means you changed. You have to keep building meaning the way you maintain a house. Clean it, fix it, throw things out, bring new things in. Let it grow with you. You don't need to be sure. You don't need a master plan. You just need to decide. Pick something and pour into it. That could be raising a child, teaching, writing, volunteering, training for something hard, loving someone well. It doesn't need to impress anyone. It just needs to be real to you. That's the test. Does it keep you moving? Does it hold you together when everything else falls apart? When people say nothing matters, they're not wrong. But that's not the end of the sentence. Nothing matters unless you make it matter. That's the whole truth. And it's enough. You don't need a grand answer. You need a reason to get up, to show up, to try. You get to choose it. You always have. You think about death sometimes. Maybe late at night. Maybe when someone close dies. Maybe when your chest hurts for a second too long, or you hear a diagnosis, or you nearly miss a car in traffic. The thought creeps in. What if this is it? What happens next? Most of the time you push it away. You tell yourself there's still time, that the end is far off, that if something waits on the other side, you'll figure it out when the time comes. But if there is something next, you're probably not ready. Not in the way you think you are. You may have beliefs, a faith, a story you were told since childhood. You might picture a light, or judgment, or reunion, or nothing at all. But your belief doesn't guarantee preparation. Knowing what you want to believe is not the same as being prepared to face it. Most people treat the afterlife like a story they enjoy, not a destination they're approaching. You say things like, "They're in a better place," or "I'll see them again." You say it because it comforts the living, because it softens grief, because the idea that this all ends in silence is too heavy. But behind those words is something more fragile. Doubt, uncertainty. You hope it's true, but you don't know. And if it is true, if something waits after this, you haven't lived like you're meeting it. You imagine a version of yourself that walks into the afterlife with peace, with pride, with clarity. But if you had to face everything you've done, everything you've ignored, everything you pretended not to feel, could you stand there without excuses? Could you answer for the people you hurt, the time you wasted, the truth you avoided? You say you're a good person, but that depends on what the standard is. And if there's something next, the standard might not be yours. Think about how you treat time. You assume you'll have enough to change, to heal, to apologize, to make things right. But the clock doesn't stop just because you're not ready. If there is something after this, you don't arrive there with more time. You arrive with what you brought. That version of you, unfinished, unfiltered, is the one that crosses over. And if there's nothing, if this all ends in silence, that's worse for some people, because it means this is it. No second round, no eternal review, no last chance. You die and it goes dark. No awareness, no you to reflect. Just the end. If that's true, then every day you spend pretending you're not going to die is a day wasted. Every conversation you avoid, every grudge you hold, every moment you delay, none of it gets carried forward. You don't get to fix it later. You just stop. People build their lives around things they can't prove. Heaven,
karma, energy, reincarnation. They say it helps them be good, helps them stay focused, gives them peace. But belief doesn't protect you from doubt, and it doesn't prepare you for the unknown. Preparation isn't about certainty, it's about honesty. If you haven't asked yourself, seriously, what you believe and why, then you're not ready. You're hoping. There's a difference. You can believe in an afterlife and still live in fear. You can be skeptical and still act with care. But if your belief gives you permission to avoid the hard work of living well now, it's a problem. If you think you can settle everything later, that you can make peace when the time comes, you're gambling. And the stakes are everything you've ever done. You might picture reunion. You might think of the people you've lost, waiting for you. You might imagine love and light and relief. But what if the afterlife isn't soft? What if it's not comfort, but truth? What if it shows you who you really are without filters? What if you stand there, not before a god or a gatekeeper, but in front of yourself, with no excuses, no distractions, no one to lie to? Could you handle that? Could you handle seeing the person you were on your worst day? Could you face the people you disappointed, the time you wasted, the kindness you withheld? Could you face the moments you were cruel, not by action, but by silence? Would you have anything to say? Most people imagine judgment as something external, a divine figure weighing your life. But maybe the worst judgment is internal. Maybe you judge yourself when all the noise is stripped away, when there's nothing left but memory and truth. And if there's nothing, if there's no after, no reunion, no voice, then your time here is the only story you ever get to write. That should matter. If this ends in silence, what you do now is all you'll ever do. Every act of love, every moment of clarity, every bit of care, that's it. It either happens now or it never happens. And if something waits for you, and everything you do still matters, just in a different way. Either way, you don't get to skip this part. You're here, alive, and time is moving. You won't get a warning. You won't get to pick the moment you die. It might be slow. It might be fast. You might see it coming or not, but it will come. And when it does, everything you've avoided comes with it. Every lie, every half-lived day, every conversation you didn't have. The only thing that goes with you, if anything does, is the truth. So if there's an afterlife, you're probably not ready. If there's not, then you're wasting time pretending there is. Either way, the end comes. Quiet or not, clean or not, prepared or not. You don't get to choose the outcome. You only choose how you face it. You think about death sometimes. Maybe late at night. Maybe when someone close dies. Maybe when your chest hurts for a second too long, or you hear a diagnosis, or you nearly miss a car in traffic. The thought creeps in. What if this is it? What happens next? Most of the time you push it away. You tell yourself there's still time, that the end is far off, that if something waits on the other side, you'll figure it out when the time comes. But if there is something next, you're probably not ready. Not in the way you think you are. You may have beliefs, a faith, a story you were told since childhood. You might picture a light, or judgment, or reunion, or nothing at all. But your belief doesn't guarantee preparation. Knowing what you want to believe is not the same as being prepared to face it. Most people treat the afterlife like a story they enjoy, not a destination they're approaching. You say things like, they're in a better place, or I'll see them again. You say it because it comforts the living, because it softens grief, because the idea that this all ends in silence is too heavy. But behind those words is something more fragile. Doubt, uncertainty. You hope it's true, but you don't know. And if it is true, if something waits after this, you haven't lived like you're meeting it. You imagine a version of yourself that walks into the afterlife with peace, with pride, with clarity. But if you had to face everything you've done, everything you've ignored, everything you pretended not to feel, could you stand there without excuses? Could you answer for the people you hurt, the time you wasted, the truth you avoided? You say you're a good person, but that depends on what the standard is. And if there's something next, the standard might not be yours. Think about how you treat time. You assume you'll have enough to change, to heal, to apologize, to make things right. but the clock doesn't stop just because you're not ready. If there is something after this, you don't arrive there with more time. You arrive with what you brought. That version of you, unfinished, unfiltered, is the one that crosses over. And if there's nothing, if this all ends in silence, that's worse for some people, because it means this is it. No second round, no eternal review, no last chance. You die and it goes dark. No awareness, no you to reflect. Just the end. If that's true, then every day you spend pretending you're not going to die is a day wasted. Every conversation you avoid, every grudge you hold, every moment you delay, none of it gets carried forward. You don't get to fix it later. You just stop. People build their lives around things they can't prove. Heaven, karma, energy, reincarnation. They say it helps them be good, helps them stay focused, gives them peace. But belief doesn't protect you from doubt, and it doesn't prepare you for the unknown. Preparation isn't about certainty, it's about honesty. If you haven't asked yourself, seriously, what you believe and why, then you're not ready. You're hoping. There's a difference. You can believe in an afterlife and still live in fear. You can be skeptical and still act with care. But if your belief gives you permission to avoid the hard work of living well now, it's a problem. If you think you can settle everything later, that you can make peace when the time comes, you're gambling, and the stakes are everything you've ever done. You might picture reunion. You might think of the people you've lost waiting for you. You might imagine love and light and relief. But what if the afterlife isn't soft? What if it's not comfort, but truth? What if it shows you who you really are without filters? What if you stand there, not before a god or a gatekeeper, but in front of yourself with no excuses, no distractions, no one to lie to? Could you handle that? Could you handle seeing the person you were on your worst day? Could you face the people you disappointed, the time you wasted, the kindness you withheld? Could you face the moments you were cruel, not by action, but by silence? Would you have anything to say? Most people imagine judgment as something external, a divine figure weighing your life, but maybe the worst judgment is internal. Maybe you judge yourself when all the noise is stripped away, when there's nothing left but memory and truth. And if there's nothing, if there's no after, no reunion, no voice, then your time here is the only story you ever get to write. That should matter. If this ends in silence, what you do now is all you'll ever do. Every act of love, every moment of clarity, every bit of care. That's it. It either happens now or it never happens. And if something waits for you, then everything you do still matters, just in a different way. Either way, you don't get to skip this part. You're here, alive, and time is moving. You won't get a warning. You won't get to pick the moment you die. It might be slow, it might be fast. You might see it coming or not, but it will come, and when it does, everything you've avoided comes with it. Every lie, every half-lived day, every conversation you didn't have. The only thing that goes with you, if anything does, is the truth. So if there's an afterlife, you're probably not ready. If there's not, then you're wasting time pretending there is. Either way, the end comes. Quiet or not, clean or not, prepared or not. You don't get to choose the outcome. You only choose how you face it.